Chapter 162. The pressure was so dense that even the air seemed to have turned into mud. The further he went, the greater the pressure. In just a short period of time, Wang Chong felt the pressure increase exponentially. "Young Master Wang, please. We've arrived at the Taiji Palace." At the same time, the voice of the head eunuch came from the front. It was calm and emotionless. "Don't." A finger lightly knocked on the wall of the carriage, and the door opened by itself. A ray of light shone through the door, but it was silent outside. An invisible tension filled the air. Wang Chong held onto the sides of the door and climbed out of the carriage. Lualulu, the carriage rumbled. Almost at the same moment that Wang Chong walked out, the palace eunuch drove the carriage away. After the carriage left, Wang Chong's eyes lit up. A majestic golden palace stood tall in front of him, as though it was in the clouds. At the four corners of the huge palace, there were four golden armored generals with disdain in their eyes. They were like gods guarding the four corners, guarding the huge palace in the center. The four golden armored generals exuded a storm-like pressure. Huge, brilliant, and resplendent halos shot out from beneath their feet, making the hall look like a kingdom of gods. The Emperor's Dragon Guards. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. Dragons had their guards, and so did the Emperor. The four golden armored generals were the most mysterious of the Emperor's Dragon Guards. Legend had it that each of the Emperor's Dragon Guards was a Saint Martial Realm expert, and each of them possessed a secret technique of the royal family. They were the Emperor's most loyal servants and subordinates. The immense pressure that Wang Chong felt before came from these Saint Martial Realm Emperor's Dragon Guards. Taking in a deep breath, Wang Chong calmed his mind and raised his head. Nearby, he could see a white jade stairway winding its way up to the massive golden gate of the palace. From afar, Wang Chong saw a few majestic golden words in front of the palace, Taiji Palace. Wang Chong muttered to himself as he recognized the handwriting. Each of these three words weighed more than 1,000 catties. Just by looking at them from afar, one could feel the heaviness in one's heart, as if a huge mountain was pressing down on it. The residence of the Son of Heaven, the great ultimate temple. This was the first time Wang Chong had seen Taiji Palace with his own eyes. It was also his first time seeing the center of this world. At this moment, the most famous holy emperor of the entire Tang dynasty in Middle-earth was only inches away from him. Wang Chong couldn't help but feel excited. Once upon a time, meeting the greatest holy emperor of the Tang dynasty was Wang Chong's greatest wish in his previous life. But at that time, Wang Chong was destined to miss this wish. Now that everything had started all over again, Wang Chong finally had the chance to fulfill his wish. Being born in this world, how could one not know the supreme ruler of this world? Whether it was prosperity or decline, he was the architect of all of this. If Wang Chong wanted to fulfill his mission and change the fate of this world, he couldn't avoid this supreme ruler of the Tang dynasty. Summon Wang Chong into the palace. Just as Wang Chong was in a daze, a sudden clap of thunder seemed to explode in the air, and a loud voice resounded through the world. Summon Wang Chong into the palace. Summon Wang Chong into the palace. Summon Wang Chong into the palace. As soon as his words fell, the echoes reverberated in all directions. His loud and clear voice resounded everywhere. Wang Chong's mind shook, and he finally came back to his senses. Stepping onto the white jade stairs, he walked step by step toward the majestic, towering Taiji Palace that seemed to be above the clouds. The pressure on his shoulders overlapped and followed him like a shadow. With every step Wang Chong took, the pressure on his body increased, and even his footsteps became exceptionally heavy. The Emperor's Dragon Guards. To get close to the Holy Emperor, one must first pass through the Emperor's Dragon Guards. The white jade stairs were the steps of the Emperor. Without a strong will or an extremely strong cultivation, one would never have the chance to meet the Emperor. In the past, countless people had been stopped on this white jade stairs. In his previous life, Wang Chong had already missed the chance to meet the Emperor. This time, Wang Chong didn't want to miss it. Tut, tut, tut. The entire Taiji Palace was quiet. Aside from Wang Chong, there was no one else. The world was quiet, and the sound of footsteps echoed throughout the world. Time passed slowly. In Wang Chang's perception, the Taiji Palace in front of him was like a huge storm. And the closer he was to the storm, the stronger the pressure. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead without him realizing it, but Wang Chong was unaware. This was a white jade staircase with thousands of steps. Wang Chong had never walked such a long staircase before. It was so long that it felt like countless centuries, with no end in sight. Sweat flowed out without him realizing it, even drenching his clothes. The pressure on his shoulders also overlapped, as if there were layers upon layers of huge mountains. Wang Chang's essence was constantly depleting, and his stamina was constantly weakening. His feet felt like they were filled with lead, making them extremely heavy. To Wang Chong, this short journey felt like a lifetime. But after some time, bzzz. Wang Chang's mind trembled as the world around him suddenly changed. An energy that caused the world to change color, solemn, dignified, and vast, suffused with a supreme aura, erupted in front of him and engulfed the world. Wang Chang's mind trembled as he suddenly snapped out of his daze. Only then did he realize that he had unknowingly reached the end of the white jade staircase. In front of him, a majestic and divine golden hall stood before him. In this hall, Wang Chong sensed an inconceivably powerful aura. Although he had already restrained it, the aura he emanated was still so powerful that it made one's heart tremble. In his previous life, Wang Chong had experienced countless battles of blood and fire. He had experienced countless trials of life and death. His will had long been tempered to become extremely tenacious. However, in front of this aura, Wang Chong could not help but feel a deep sense of reverence. It was as though he was facing the heavens and earth. Before this aura, everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of inferiority. In that instant, Wang Chong couldn't help but fall into a daze. Some distant memories, like dregs, suddenly floated up in his mind at this moment. Inexplicably, Wang Chong once again recalled that controversial topic in his future life in the world of the Tang dynasty, in the Central Plains, who was the true #1 expert. In the apocalyptic era, was he the one who received orders to turn the tide and become the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains, leading the last soldiers of the Central Plains to battle against the foreign cavalry for 10-odd years, and ultimately slaying Kong Yaoyuan? Or was he the one who fought against 10,000 alone, and in the final moments of his life, he valiantly killed tens of thousands of foreign invaders? Or was it someone like his master, the demonic Emperor Old Man, who, though unknown in the imperial court, had shone brightly in the martial arts world, becoming an invincible expert who dominated the world? Or was he the unfathomable, snow-white, and unprepossessing holy monk from the Uzun Plateau? In an instant, countless famous figures that Wang Chong knew flashed through his mind. But in the end, they were all denied by Wang Chong. In this world, if there was one person who could suppress everyone else and be called the world's undisputed #1 expert, then Wang Chong believed that this person could, and it could only be one person. The supreme and unfathomable Holy Emperor, the Son of Heaven, of the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong deeply remembered that those seniors who helped him to the position of Grand Marshal had once said that if the Holy Emperor, the Son of Heaven, of the Tang dynasty was still alive, if the greatest emperor in the history of the Central Plains was still alive, if that was the case, this war might turn out to be a completely different situation. Because in the history of the Tang dynasty, the Holy Emperor, the Son of Heaven, was the only one who had managed to reach the divine martial realm and survive. The difference between the holy martial realm and the divine martial realm was like the difference between heaven and earth, between man and God. The two were incalculable. Most of the experts in the holy martial realm did not have the qualification to reach the divine martial realm even at the end of their lives. Among them was Wang Chong of the previous generation. There were various opinions about the Son of Heaven's attempt to reach the divine martial realm in the Tang dynasty. Some people said that the attempt had failed. But Wang Chong had personally heard those seniors say that they had indeed felt the aura of the divine martial realm from the Holy Emperor. Therefore, whether the Holy Emperor's attempt was a success or a failure, or a half-success or a half-failure, no one would ever know. Judging from the time, it should have happened not long ago. Wang Chong raised his head and murmured in his heart. Wang Chong had once hated and complained about the holy emperor of the Tang dynasty. But in the end, when he walked to the front of this Tai Chi palace and was very close to the holy emperor of the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong found that in the end, there was only respect left in his heart. Perhaps he had made many mistakes, perhaps he had single-handedly caused the destruction of this empire. But in the end, what Wang Chong remembered was still the founder of the prosperity of the Tang dynasty. At the same time, he was also the most proactive and enterprising pioneer in the history of the entire Middle Earth. The doors of the Tai Chi palace were wide open. Wang Chong took a deep breath and, against the mountain-like pressure, stepped through the doors of the Tai Chi palace. Rumble. The moment he stepped through the doors, the world shook. It was just a single step, but Wang Chong felt as if he had stepped from one world into another, from another space to another. In an instant, Wang Chong felt a powerful aura, an existence that was much more powerful than himself in his previous life. A supreme existence that was even more unfathomable than So Young's son and the evil emperor. In an instant, the whole world seemed to fall silent. In Wang Chong's world, there was only that unreachable figure. Wang Chong greets the holy emperor, the son of heaven. Chapter 163. The entire Taiji palace was silent. Wang Chong could feel a pair of dignified and disdainful eyes looking down from above, piercing through the void and landing on him. From this gaze, Wang Chong could only feel one thing: unfathomable. Since ancient times, accompanying a sovereign is like accompanying a tiger, and the might of the heavens is unfathomable, Wang Chong could not sense any emotion from this gaze. He was also unable to fathom what the son of heaven of the Tang dynasty was thinking. In the silence of the palace, Wang Chong remained kneeling on the floor, unmoving. In the silence of the palace, Wang Chong could hear his own heartbeat. After an unknown period of time, which felt like an instant, but also like countless centuries, Wang Chong finally heard an authoritative and thunderous voice. Wang Chong, I heard that you are opposed to my regional commander's system and the WHO system? The voice was indifferent, devoid of any emotion. Wang Chong's heart trembled. When a subject submitted a memorial, he had to answer it. However, the Holy Emperor's words weren't easy to answer. On a smaller scale, Wang Chong was only expressing his opinion on the Holy Emperor's words. On a larger scale, Wang Chong was opposing the Holy Emperor. Yes. Wang Chong hesitated, but he still replied. Speak. That voice spoke calmly, authoritatively, and majestically. Yes. Wang Chong lowered his head and replied respectfully. The air in the palace churned, and a gust of wind blew in. Wang Chong's heart began to tremble along with this gust of wind. For some reason, the words Big Uncle Wang Zhen had said on the carriage echoed in his ears once more. The more you speak, the fewer mistakes you'll make. The less you speak, the less mistakes you'll make. If His Majesty asks, you must answer. If you know, you must say that you know. If you don't know, you must say that you don't know. If you know, you must only say that you know. You don't understand politics, so you don't know anything. It's my first time meeting the emperor. I don't want to be meritorious, but I want to avoid making mistakes. This matter concerns our entire Wang clan. It's not just you and your father, but me, your big aunt, your little uncle, and everyone else. You mustn't be reckless. Remember this. These words were the culmination of Big Uncle Wang Zhen's decades of experience. Even though it sounded slippery, it was the best advice for an inexperienced scion like Wang Chong. The more you speak, the more mistakes you will make. The less you speak, the less mistakes you will make. Entering the palace to meet the emperor was no small matter. With the Wang clan's current status, they no longer needed Wang Chong's help in this matter. As long as he didn't make any mistakes, everything would be fine. It was just that. Thinking back to his previous life, Wang Chong couldn't make himself remain silent. The Jidushi system and the Hu system were the root causes of the chaos in the Tang dynasty. Now, he finally had a chance to meet the Holy Emperor and have a chance to remonstrate with him. If he missed this opportunity, he would never be able to forgive himself for the rest of his life. At this point, Wang Chong hesitated no more. Your Majesty, the Jidushi system and the Hu system are the root causes of the chaos in the Tang dynasty. This policy must not be implemented. In the next moment, Wang Chong kneeled on the ground and recounted his thoughts in detail, even including the words he had used to persuade the elders in the Four Quarters Embassy without holding anything back. No one knew better than Wang Chong how dangerous the Jidushi system would be in the future. Wang Chong knew that this was an opportunity for him to change history. Your Majesty, the Hu have formed their own faction. The Hu protect the Hu, and the Hu promote the Hu. Once this precedent is set, it will surely bring disaster to the Tang dynasty. Your Majesty, please reconsider. After saying those words, Wang Chong kneeled on the floor, not moving in the slightest. These words came from the bottom of his heart, and they were Wang Chong's true thoughts. Those who had never experienced that chaotic era would never be able to imagine it. To Wang Chong, the words he said to his grandfather and the Holy Emperor weren't just a possibility or a prophecy. They were a reality that would happen in the future. However, other than him, no one else in the Central Plains knew of it. Even more so, no one knew that the fate of the empire rested on a single thought of the Holy Emperor. The hall was silent, devoid of any sound. After an unknown period of time, Wang Chong finally heard a voice. I understand. You can leave now. When you return, write a memorial of what you have just said and submit it to me. This was the third and final sentence that Wang Chong had heard since entering the Taiji Palace. Yes. Wang Chong was taken aback. After which, he bowed and left the hall. Who? Beneath the white jade steps, a gust of wind blew, and Wang Chong's entire body turned cold. Only then did he realize that even his shoes were wet. Accompanying a sovereign was like accompanying a tiger. The pressure in the Taiji Palace was simply too great. In there, every step Wang Chong took was even more difficult than a major battle. But this wasn't what Wang Chong was concerned about. I wonder if His Majesty has listened to me? Recalling what had just happened, Wang Chong's heart was filled with worry. Wang Chong was in a daze. Even when he came out at the end, Wang Chong didn't know whether he had succeeded or failed. He wondered if His Majesty had listened to him at all. Accompanying a sovereign is like accompanying a tiger. In the entire hall, Wang Chong had said quite a bit, saying everything that needed to be said. But from the moment he entered to the moment he came out, Wang Chong had only heard 3 sentences. Wang Chong, I heard that you oppose my regional commander's system and the Hu system? Speak. I understand. You can leave now. When you return, write a memorial of what you have just said and submit it to me. Just based on these 3 sentences, Wang Chong couldn't tell whether the Holy Emperor was delighted or furious. He couldn't tell whether he had listened to what he had said or not. Furthermore, what was the meaning behind the other party's request for him to write a memorial? Wang Gongzi, please. A familiar voice sounded. Wang Chong snapped out of his daze and saw a golden carriage parked not too far away. A eunuch stood by the side, and it was the head eunuch who had escorted him into the royal palace. The heart of a sovereign is truly unfathomable. Wang Chong sighed as he lowered his head and entered the carriage. The carriage left the royal palace, and eventually, Wang Chong was sent to the Wang family residence. Not long after returning to the residence, Wang Chong wrote all of his thoughts, as well as his thoughts on the financial system, into a memorial. That very night, Wang Chong's memorial was sent to the royal palace along with the head eunuch. After doing all of this, Wang Chong tossed everything aside and began to cultivate the complete version of the little yin-yang art. Panglong. A single stone raised 1,000 ripples. Wang Chong had never imagined that on the very next day, his memorial would appear in the imperial court and be circulated to all the officials, causing a huge uproar in the court. Preposterous. Wang Zhen, is this the opinion of your Wang clan? Your Majesty, this humble subject wishes to impeach Wang Zhen and that Wang Chong. That day, in the royal court, Imperial censor Zhou Zhang suddenly bellowed furiously and grabbed Wang Zhen's beard. What? In an instant, a huge commotion broke out in the royal court. No one had expected Zhou Zhang to make a move before so many people. Lord Zhou, let go. Zhou Zhang, what are you doing? How dare you act so audaciously before the Son of Heaven? That the officials surrounded Wang Zhen and Zhou Zhang tightly, and the situation was chaotic. But before the first wave subsided, another wave rose. At the same time that the officials surrounded Wang Zhen and Zhou Zhang, Wang Zhen and Zhou Zhang were stunned. In the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the ground shook violently, as though a meteor had crashed into the ground. Amidst the crowd of officials, a tall and sturdy figure knelt heavily on the ground like a falling jade pillar, prostrating himself in worship. Your Majesty, this humble subject Abusi has made great contributions to the Tang dynasty. I am loyal and devoted to you. Your Majesty, I beseech your Majesty to uphold justice for this humble subject. Following Abusi's words, thud 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 thud. The officials in the royal court knelt down like wooden pillars. In the 200-odd years since the establishment of the Tang dynasty, the Hu and Han had lived together. Not only were there Han officials in the royal court, there were also Hu generals. Wang Chang's memorial caused all of the Hu generals in the royal court to kneel with their heads facing the Holy Emperor. In an instant, the originally noisy imperial court fell into a deathly silence. All of the officials stared at the kneeling Hu officials, speechless. Only Wang Zhen stood in the royal court, his clothes in disarray. Looking at the kneeling Hu officials, his face warped in shock. But this wasn't the end of the matter. Voila! Countless pigeons, kites, jays, eagles, and eagles flew out from the capital. There had never been a day when so many birds flew out from the capital. The birds that were transmitting messages blotted out the sky and covered the sun, covering the entire sky. Upon seeing this sight, even the elders who had lived in the capital for decades were dumbfounded. Preposterous! 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 In the Chishi governor's manor in the rear of the western regions, a blue-eyed, bearded Hu with a domineering aura bellowed in rage. I have contributed greatly to the Tang dynasty while guarding the western regions. How dare a brat humiliate me like this? How hateful! He deserves to die. Hong Long, the green-eyed Hu raised his palm, and with a loud boom, the metal table in front of him shattered into pieces. The immense force caused the ground to tremble, and a huge cloud of dust burst out of the governor's manor, rising nearly 100 zhang into the air. The Hu form their own faction, the Han promote the Hu, and the Hu promote the Hu. Feng Changqing, aren't you a Han official? This brat is spouting nonsense, he deserves to die. In the vast desert of the western regions, a 5,000-strong armored army was on the move. At the very front of the army was a beautiful and handsome general with an aura that was as vast as the mountains and as vast as the seas. He looked no different from a Han, but the Xinlua jade token by his waist revealed his identity. He was the Anshi Vice Protector General, Duke of Miyun, Gao Xinji. He was the only Xinlua Vice Protector General in the entire Tang dynasty, as well as the highest standing of the Xinlua people in the Tang dynasty. In the military world of the Tang dynasty, he wielded unparalleled authority. Anshi Vice Protector General Gao Xinji was known for his elegant bearing, and even when he was angry, he maintained a calm expression. However, Gao Xinji raised his right hand, and with a crack, the neck of a warhorse broke. Without any warning, it suddenly fell to the ground, motionless. Chapter 164. In the new city bordering Uzan and Longyu of the Tang dynasty, a valiant general with a pair of eagle eyes and a tall nose harumphed coldly as a piercing glint flashed across his eyes. The Big Dipper rises high in the sky, and Geshu Han carries his saber in the night. In the western border of the Tang dynasty, there was no one who didn't know of the Big Dipper General Geshu Han. Dressed in golden armor and carrying a long saber by his waist, he was the Big Dipper General Geshu Han. There were many generals in the Great Tang Empire, but there were very few who could be called great generals and had a status above the other generals. As the vice commander of the Big Dipper Army, the Big Dipper General Geshu Han's standing was unimaginable. A memorial submitted by a 15-year-old youth had stirred up a storm in the royal court, shaking the entire royal court. It was impossible for Geshu Han to be unaware of such a huge matter. In truth, he had been standing on the city walls for a very long time with the news delivered by a messenger pigeon in his hand. Another repeat of the events in Cheng. Yet another commander of Cheng. Damn it. Geshu Han's face steeled as he gripped the letter tightly. Back then, during the reign of the previous emperor, Geshu Han's mother passed away, and he lived in the Tang dynasty for several decades, admiring the elegance of the Tang dynasty. When his mother passed away, Geshu Han learned the customs of the Han and observed mourning for 3 years, but he was mocked by a lowly official in the capital, commander of Cheng. He said that the Hu learned the customs of the great Zhou, and that they were nothing more than monkeys. Geshu Han was extremely filial to his mother, and he viewed this matter as a great humiliation. It was precisely because of this that Geshu Han threw away his brush and joined the army. And now, Wang Chang's memorial reminded him of that lowly official in Cheng. Boom. Cold, killing intent flashed across Geshu Han's eyes. Boom. A burst of flames burst into the air, reaching a height of more than 10 zhang, and incinerating the letter in Geshu Han's hand. In the 200 years of the Tang dynasty, there were innumerable Hu. Wang Chang's memorial had incurred the wrath of countless Hu. Wang Chang's memorials flew in from all directions like snowflakes. This would have been fine, but Wang Chang's memorial had not only enraged these people. Qi Shi Protector General and Anxi Protector General Fuming Lingmeng, Vice Protector General Gao Xianji, Big Dipper Great General Geshu Han, Biding Vice Protector General and Sishun, these Hu great generals all held influential positions in the Tang dynasty. When the angry memorials of these Protector Generals, Deputy Protector Generals, and Great Generals appeared in the court of the Tang dynasty, the nature of the matter instantly changed. Even Wang Zhen's face paled. The impact of this matter far exceeded his expectations, and he was in a state of losing control. Not only that, the Hu had been vassals for so many years, and this had affected not only the Hu, but the Han in the royal court as well. Many of the imperial censors did not dare to attack Duke Jiao, so they targeted the 15-year-old Wang Chong. In an agitated tone, they said that Wang Chong was ridiculing the court. Some of the other officials were even more agitated. They said that Wang Chong and the Wang clan harbored malicious intentions and intended to divide the Han and Hu against each other. This was detrimental to the Han, and they demanded that Wang Chong punish them severely, even including Wang Chong's big uncle Wang General. Many people had not expected this matter to develop to this extent. The consort Taizhen incident had only affected the civil and military officials of the royal court, as well as the local officials. Its influence was limited to the Han. However, Wang Chong's memorial pushed the regional commanders system and the Hu into a corner, dragging all of the Hu and their border generals into the mix as well. In terms of influence, this matter had far surpassed that consort Taizhen incident. Deep in the night, all was quiet. While many people in the capital were still sleeping, the Wang family residence was brightly lit by candles. "Chong, you can't. You have to hide for a while." In Wang Chong's study, big uncle Wang Zhen was pacing back and forth, his hands behind his back. His eyes were sunken, and there was a faint green tint to them. It seemed like he had not rested for a long time. The regional commander system and the Hu great generals have already far surpassed the expectations of you, me, and the old master. The repercussions of this matter are too great. These imperial censors are not only going to interrogate you and me, they are even planning to impeach the old master. Wang Zhen's anxiety was undisguised. Only he himself knew how much pressure he had been under in this period of time. Gao Xianji, Fomin Linta, Geshu Han, and Sishun, these esteemed Hu great generals had not only sent memorials to the court, they had also sent him letters of criticism. Wang Zhen was an important official of the court, and his status was definitely not low. But these people, not a single one of them had a lower status than him. Only the heavens knew how much pressure Wang Zhen had been under when all the Hu great generals' letters of criticism had arrived at his residence. And this was only a small part of it. Every morning, those imperial censors and Han generals who sympathized with the Hu would surround him, either cursing or impeaching him. Even his court robes would be torn. In his decades in the court, Wang Zhen had encountered all sorts of political storms. But this time, it was completely different. Wang Zhen could smell an intense danger. They dare. Behind his desk, Wang Chong clenched his fists in fury. He already knew everything, including the torrent of curses from the Hu and the censors accusing him of interfering in court affairs. From today onwards, the Tang dynasty, the Central Plains, and all the Hu, including him, would be irreconcilable enemies with the Wang clan. The Tang dynasty had been established for more than 200 years, and the Hu had already infiltrated every aspect of the country. Now that Wang Chong had offended these people, it was easy to imagine how his future would turn out. But regardless of whether it was the wrath of the Hu generals or the censors, Wang Chong wasn't afraid of them. Wang Chong only felt grief and indignation. He was impeaching the Hu. The regional commander's system and the Hu system had always been beneficial to the Hu. Anyone who opposed these two policies would be harming the interests of all Hu. Wang Chong wasn't surprised at all that he would incur the scolding and questioning of so many Hu. What Wang Chong was truly concerned about were the Han who supported the Hu and opposed him. Blinded by a single leaf, unable to see Mount Tai, stuffed with beans in one's ears, unable to hear the thunder, that was right. Chi Kuan Healy was indeed a loyal official. Ashina Shi-er had also contributed greatly to the Tang dynasty. These two were good Hu officials under Emperor Taizong, but who was the one who fought against Emperor Taizong? The Han? It was the Hu. Who was the one fighting against the Tang dynasty to the north of the Yin Mountains and west of the Tsong Mountains? Was it the Han? It was the Hu. It was the Yuzin's men. Regardless of the era or space-time, there would always be some people who forgot their identity and sympathized with their enemies more than their own people. They could easily put themselves in the shoes of their enemies and sympathize with them. But it was only towards their own people that they were exceptionally harsh. They would often berate and criticize coldly, saying that they didn't see the big picture, didn't understand etiquette, and lost the demeanor of a great country. Divide the Han and the Han? Pit the Hu and the Han against each other? Was there a need for him to create a conflict between the Hu and the Han? Wasn't this already the truth? Wouldn't it be these who would incite a rebellion and tear apart the Tang dynasty in the future? Wouldn't it be these who would govern the military towns in the future? Never overestimate the loyalty of the Hu. This was the lesson that Wang Chong learned from his previous life. When the Tang dynasty was at its peak, they were willing to serve the Tang dynasty. But when the Tang dynasty fell, don't expect them to be willing to serve the Han to the death. Instead of thinking about how to protect themselves, they were willing to relinquish their authority to the Hu, allowing them to fight for them on the battlefield and protect them. How foolish and laughable was that? Might makes right. Regardless of which era it was, any people who didn't understand this principle deserved to die. Chonga, this isn't the time to let your emotions affect your decisions. You have to find a way to hide. Try not to show yourself in this period of time. Wang Zhen said solemnly. Hide? Where can I hide? If the censors were to impeach me and the royal court summons me, how can I not go? Wang Chong said calmly. Seated behind his desk, his expression was calm and fearless, as if he had already thought through everything and made all preparations. Looking at the composed Wang Chong, Wang Zhen felt an indescribable emotion welling up in his heart. Once upon a time, he had always treated Wang Chong as an immature 15-year-old child. Thus, he had always treated Wang Chong harshly, often reprimanding him. Even after Wang Chong schemed against the Yao clan, Wang Zhen still felt that he was too young to bear such great responsibility. But at this moment, Wang Zhen suddenly realized that while Wang Chong might still be young, his heart had already matured into that of an adult. Even he was unable to maintain his composure regarding the regional commander's incident and the Hu matter, but this nephew of his, as the instigator of all of this, was actually able to maintain his composure, even coldly stating the unavoidable truth to him. This was something that even he was unable to do. Chong, you've finally grown up? At this moment, Wang Zhen couldn't help but sigh. Not even he realized that at this moment his view of Wang Chong had greatly changed. Unknowingly, Wang Zhen had begun to view him as a trustworthy peer who he could discuss things with. Chong is right. I also feel that he has no way of avoiding this matter, nor can he avoid it. A voice came from the side. Wang Chong's little uncle, Wang Mi, was seated by the side, a contemplative look on his face. He had rushed back yesterday. With such a major incident happening in the Wang clan, it was impossible for him not to return. At this sort of time, it was always better to have another person to discuss things with. But he didn't understand the matters of the court, so he couldn't interfere in the conversation between Wang Chong and his older brother. But instinctively, Wang Mi felt that what Wang Chong said was correct. Chong, I hope that little uncle feels that you were too rash in this matter. In truth, you didn't have to write that memorial at all. Impossible. I had to write that memorial and I had to write it this way. Before little uncle could finish his words, Wang Chong interrupted him. Wang Chong wouldn't regret this matter at all. There were some things that one had to do regardless of the price, even if one knew that it would be filled with thorns. Once he did it, Wang Chong wouldn't regret it. Sighed. Wang Mi and Wang Zhen sighed deeply. He had even stopped a carriage along the way to persuade Wang Chong to enter the royal palace, but he didn't think that Wang Chong would still go through with it. Furthermore, it was done in a way that he didn't expect. But what was done could not be undone, and even the old master had agreed to it. There was nothing Wang Zhen could say about it. Just as they were in the midst of their discussion, a loud bang sounded from outside. It seemed like someone had barged in. The trio in the study raised their heads. But before they could stand up, boom. With a resounding boom, the door to Wang Chong's study was smashed into pieces by a powerful force. Before the shocked gazes of the trio, several chamberlains of imperial insignia barged in from the door. You are Wang Chong? The few of them stared at Wang Chong coldly as they spoke impassively. I am. Wang Chong was bewildered. He couldn't make sense of what was going on. Very well. Wang Chong, you've been arrested. Come with us. The chamberlains of imperial insignia said coldly. After which, they stepped forward and grabbed Wang Chong from both sides, ready to leave. What? Wang Zhen and Wang Mi were shocked. At this moment, Wang Zhen saw the token hanging on their waists. It was a black prison character. They were the prison guards of the royal palace. Wait a moment. What crime are you arresting him for? In the annals of the Tang dynasty, you dare to arrest someone who has never committed a crime. Wang Zhen bellowed furiously. How dare you interfere in the affairs of the royal court? One of the royal guards took out a golden order to detain him. This is a warrant from the royal court. There are the signatures of the Minister of War, Minister of Punishments, Prime Minister, and Censor. More importantly, there's also His Majesty's seal. What? Wang Zhen's body trembled. Looking at the dragon seal on the warrant, he felt as though he had been struck by lightning. He couldn't believe his eyes. Lord Wang, you are an important official of the royal court. I hope that you won't obstruct the royal court's decision to detain a serious criminal. Otherwise, don't blame us for capturing you as well and throwing you into the imperial prison. The final words of the royal guard left even Wang Mi dumbfounded. Imperial prison? Not the Bureau of Punishments? Not the Court of Judicial Review? And the imperial prison of the royal palace. Wasn't that a place where only criminals on death row were locked up? Wang Mi was dumbfounded. But the prison guards didn't fall into a daze. They sealed Wang Chong's acupoint and dragged him out of the room. In just a few moments, they had already disappeared from sight. A long time later, a sorrowful cry sounded from the Wang Chong residence. At this time, it was daybreak. Chapter 165. In the inner courtyard of the imperial palace, the dragon drum and dragon bell rang together. The news of Wang Chong's arrest and imprisonment spread. Before the morning court session began, an old official with white hair appeared in the inner palace. His hair and beard were all standing on end, his whole body was trembling, and his face was full of grief and indignation. His white head kept banging against the dragon drum and bell, causing blood to flow out. There has never been a precedent of disrespecting the imperial court. Your Majesty, are you going to set a precedent and be punished for your words? The old censor he banged the drum and bell again and again, his expression incomparably furious. As an old minister of the previous dynasty and an imperial censor during the reign of the late emperor, He Ting was loyal and devoted. He admonished the late emperor with a straight face and once received the imperial elixir edict iron voucher. It was just that he was getting on in years and was now over 70 years old, so he resigned and returned home. He hadn't been involved in politics for 30 years, and he didn't expect something like this to happen. Hearing about Wang Chang's matter, the old imperial censor was incomparably furious. Almost as soon as he received the news, he ordered his children to prepare their court robes, took the previous emperor's Dan Shu iron voucher, opened the city gates, and went straight to the inner court. This has never happened in the 200 years since the founding of this dynasty. If His Majesty were to be punished for this matter, he would definitely be an incapable ruler. But the impact caused by Wang Chong was far more than that. When the bell rang in the morning, all the civil and military officials rushed in. Your subject, Zhang Yakan, requests Your Majesty to release Wang Chong. Almost as soon as they entered the hall, one of the ministers fell to his knees with a thud. Then the second, the third, the fourth. Your subject Lu Lin requests Your Majesty to release Wang Chong. Your subject, Su Hanwu, requests Your Majesty to release Wang Chong. Subordinate Sun Taijia beseeches Your Majesty to release Wang Chong. I, Gu Tong, request Your Majesty to release Wang Chong. Each of the ministers had a solemn look on their faces, and their expressions were filled with anger. Zhang Yakan, Lu Lin, Su Hanwu, what are you trying to do? This scene caused Xiao He and the others to be flabbergasted, all of them stunned. However, right after Xiao He finished speaking, something even more shocking happened. This official has a complaint against Xiao He. I, Li Yunlin, wish to lodge a complaint against Lu Yu. Your subject Zhang Song wishes to lodge a complaint against Zhou Ju. I, Lu Feng, would like to lodge a complaint against Zhang Gui. Your subject, Zhou Renren, wishes to present a copy of Great General Abusi's book. Thud, thud, thud. The figures knelt down heavily like wooden stakes. Even Great General Luo Busi was stunned by the last sentence. The large imperial court suddenly fell silent. Xiao He and the others did not know why, but when they saw the furious gazes that were directed at them one after another, Xiao He and the others vaguely understood something. They suddenly felt a chill run down their spines. Rejection. A strong rejection. For the first time, Xiao He felt like they were being labeled. For the first time, Xiao He tasted the feeling of being ostracized by the civil and military officials. When Wang Chong said that the Hu formed their own faction, these officials initially did not believe it and even felt that it was not a big deal. But this time, so many Hu generals had submitted a joint petition. How could Wang Chong be wrong? Gao Xianji was from Xinluo. Fomen Linta was a Chang. Geshu Han was from Tuki. Abusi was from Tongluo. And Sishun was from Turkic. But this time, for the sake of dealing with Wang Chong, these different Hu were actually willing to work together. All of the Han officials were infuriated. And when Wang Chong was captured and thrown into the imperial prison in the early hours of the morning, his rage reached its peak. The Hu formed their own faction. Was there even a need to say it? Initially, everyone was still disapproving of Wang Chong's petition. But now, who would dare to think that way? The most hateful thing was that as the imperial censor, Xiao He and the others were actually speaking up for an outsider. An outsider was detestable, but an insider was even more so. Xiao He and the others did not know that they had already been marked with the symbol of a foreign tribe. Right now, anyone who spoke up for the Hu would be the enemy of all the Han officials. The entire imperial court was silent. Other than Xiao He and the other Hu generals, all of the Han officials kneeled down, refusing to budge. Your Majesty, Wang Chong is only a 15-year-old child, and he has a patriotic heart. If he were to be punished for his words, wouldn't the people of the world be disappointed? I beseech Your Majesty to look into this matter. When Duke Su and the other dukes, whose standing wasn't beneath Gao Xianji, kneeled down, the atmosphere in the imperial court reached a boiling point. These words didn't just represent Duke Su's words, it also represented the thoughts of all of the officials kneeling here. The entire imperial court was deathly silent. Standing amidst the crowd, Wang Zhen looked at this sight with a myriad of emotions in his heart. Chong, did you see that? Initially, Wang Zhen felt that Wang Chong didn't listen to his advice and wrote the petition. But at this moment, Wang Zhen felt that Wang Chong's actions were the right choice. That morning, when more than 80% of the officials kneeled down to plead for Wang Chong, the news shook the entire imperial court. The Wang family. Release me, release me. When the news that her brother Wang Chong had been captured and thrown into the imperial prison spread, the Wang family's little sister flew into a rage. 4 guards, 8 servants, and 6 maids couldn't hold her back at all. One of the guards was sent flying, crashing heavily into the wall, causing it to collapse. Wang Xiaoyao's innate strength wasn't something that an ordinary person could withstand. "Let me into the palace. How dare he capture my brother? I'll kill that dog of an emperor." The Wang family's little sister bellowed furiously. "Young mistress, you mustn't say such words. If others were to hear such words, they would surely kill you." All of the guards, maids, and servants paled upon hearing those words. How could such words be spoken so casually? If word were to spread, the Wang clan would be punished with confiscation. In an instant, 6 to 7 hands reached for the Wang family's little sister's mouth, and even more guards rushed forward to surround her and press her down. Not too far away from Wang Xiaoyao, Madame Wang was seated on a wooden armchair. If she had heard the Wang family's little sister spouting such outrageous words in the past, she would have long slapped her. But at this moment, Madame Wang sat there motionlessly, tears flowing down her cheeks. Madame Wang had witnessed Wang Chong being captured, and from then on, she hadn't had a single drop of water to drink. "Have you sent anyone over to the old master's residence?" Madame Wang suddenly asked. "I've been there. The doors of the 4 quarters embassy are tightly shut, and it's impossible to enter at the moment." The guard lowered his head, and his expression was extremely gloomy. In an instant, despair flashed across Madame Wang's eyes. As a woman, there was nothing she could do. She could only pin her hopes on her father-in-law. But for some reason, the doors of the 4 quarters embassy were tightly shut all of a sudden, such that even her big brother couldn't enter. Madame Wang had no idea what was going on. The only person she could think of who could save Wang Chong was her father-in-law. If even her father-in-law was helpless, then she really didn't know what she could do. Madame Wang wasn't the only one despairing. "What should we do? Should we inform young master's master of this matter?" In the corner of the room, Shanhai suddenly thought of the evil emperor. "It's useless. This is a matter of the royal court. Besides, his martial arts have been crippled, so there's no need to disturb him." Shanhai's suggestion was rejected by Meng Long without any hesitation. He wanted to save the young master as well, but this wasn't a viable solution. At the same time, in the backyard of the Wang family residence, a gray-robed middle-aged man sighed deeply. Li Zhuxin was hired by Wang Chong at a cost of 5,000 gold taels. He had once promised to ensure Wang Chong's safety. However, this matter was truly beyond his capabilities. On the wall not too far away from Li Zhuxin, Mayasame Ayaka was squatting silently with her head lowered. She seemed to be in low spirits. Although they were all top-notch experts, they were also helpless in this kind of situation. Under an old locust tree in the west of the city, So Young-sun sat upright with a golden chessboard placed before him. From dawn till dusk, the other side of the golden chessboard was still empty. So Young-sun still didn't see the figure he was waiting for. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. The old servant Fong Hong hurried over and whispered into So Young-sun's ears. Hearing Fong Hong's words, So Young-sun's eyelids twitched, and his face warped in shock. A gust of wind blew past, and the locust tree fell silent. So Young-sun sat beneath the old locust tree with his eyes closed. A contemplative look appeared on his face. No one could tell what he was thinking. "It seems like I won't be able to play today." After an unknown period of time, So Young-sun slowly opened his eyes. With a wave of his hand, he tidied up the black and white stones on the table and placed them back into the box. Then he picked up the golden chessboard and slowly walked out. "Grandfather, you must save Big Brother." So Young-sun had barely taken a few steps when a figure suddenly pounced over and hugged So Young-sun's ankle, bawling loudly. Su Zhengxin turned around, and the first thing he saw was the teary-eyed little Jian hugging him. He had always been fond of candies, but at this moment, the candied haw had fallen to the ground and was thrown to the side. "Did you hear that?" So Young-sun said. Fong Hong's voice was already very soft, but this child's ears were sharper than his. Grandfather, Big Brother once said that you are formidable. Big Brother isn't a bad person. You must think of a way to save him. Xiao Jianjian bawled. So Young-sun fell silent. He gazed at Xiao Jianjian beneath him and sighed deeply. Then he slowly pulled his leg out and disappeared into the night. The darkness of the night didn't calm the atmosphere in the capital. Instead, it grew more and more agitated. Wang Chong's arrest had already surpassed the scope of the Wang clan and the memorial that Wang Chong had written. The Hu generals, vice protector generals, and protector generals had jointly accused Wang Chong, as well as Wang Chong's imprisonment. As time passed, the rage didn't subside. Instead, it only grew more intense. After the court session ended, innumerable petitions flew into the inner palace, requesting for Wang Chong's release. This was no longer a matter that concerned Wang Chong alone. It was a storm between the Hu and Han. As night fell, countless messenger pigeons flew in all directions, revealing that more than 80% of the Han officials had knelt down to plead for Wang Chong. This matter immediately triggered an even more intense reaction among the Hu by the borders. The rage of the Han didn't make the Hu compromise. Instead, it incited even greater fury among them. Bastards! What are the Han up to? In the Qixi Protectorate manor, Fomenlinta flew into a thunderous rage, and the entire ground trembled in response to his rage. Their hearts are cold, but aren't we cold as well? We who have bathed in blood on the battlefield for the Empire, and yet, we have to suffer the humiliation of a brat. If I don't kill that brat, I won't be able to quell the hatred in my heart. I will write a blood letter to the Holy Emperor. That brat must die. Let's see if His Majesty will choose that brat or us Hu generals. Memorials from the Anxi Protectorate Manor, Qixi Protectorate Manor, Anbei Protectorate Manor, the Big Dipper Army, and many other Hu generals by the borders flew into the capital like snowflakes. This time, it wasn't just Gao Xianji, Fomenlinta, Geshu Han, and Sishun, and hundreds of Hu generals. Furthermore, unlike the first impeachment, all of the memorials this time were requesting for Wang Chong's death. If we don't kill that brat, we won't be able to appease the anger of the soldiers. If His Majesty doesn't kill that brat, the hearts of the Hu will turn cold. These were the most frequent words in the memorials of the Hu generals. More than 80% of the officials submitted a memorial to plead for Wang Chong. This matter infuriated all of the Hu generals. They were no longer calling for the impeachment of the Wang clan and Wang Chong, but for Wang Chong's death. When the Hu generals' memorials requesting for Wang Chong's death arrived in the capital like snowflakes, they had no idea that this matter had already attracted the attention of another faction. Bastards! Do they really think that the Tang dynasty belongs to them? Do they really think that the Tang dynasty only has Geshu Han, Fomenlinta, and Gao Xianji? Chapter 166. If we don't get rid of this brat, we won't be able to vent the anger in our soldiers' hearts? What do these Hu think they are doing here? Are they trying to claim credit for themselves just because they have made some contributions? By the side of the raging sea, a few warships were parked. War flags fluttered in the wind, and two words were written on them: Fubo. By the side of the warship, a black-bearded general looked at the news with an awful expression. Pass down my orders. Write a memorial to the emperor. Whoever dares to instigate the execution of Wang Chong will be an enemy of our Fubo army. Ha! Laughable! 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 These fellows actually dare to threaten His Majesty? Looks like that child is right. These Hu are a faction of their own. I would like to see if the words of our Han clan or those barbarians are the ones calling the shots in the Tang dynasty and the Central Plains. On a hill in the darkness of the night, a muscular general looked at the letter in his hands with a livid expression and roared furiously, "Pass on my orders. Write a memorial to the imperial court, travel 800 miles at top speed, and travel day and night without rest. Whoever dares to touch Wang Chong will be killed by me, Luan. My southern garrison army will protect that Wang Chong." Similar incidents were happening all over the Central Plains. In the history of the Tang dynasty, there had never been a case of so many Hu generals requesting the execution of a single person. Similarly, there had never been a single matter that could incite the wrath of so many Han generals in the Tang dynasty. That night, when the Hu generals' memorials were flying toward the capital, hundreds of Han generals' memorials were also flying toward the capital with blazing anger. The clopping of hooves resounded in the darkness. While the entire Tang dynasty was in chaos due to Wang Chong's matter, the underground of the Tang dynasty's royal palace was serene and silent. Not a single piece of news was able to reach this place. A soft groan, low and lonely, echoed in the gloomy prison cell. After some time, Wang Chong finally moved. Wang Chong was awakened by the sound of water dripping. In the dark underground, the sound of water dripping was especially loud. It hurts. Wang Chong scratched his head, and all he could feel was dizziness. The golden guards of insignia were extremely heavy-handed. That blow on his sleeping acupoint was definitely not just a light tap. Where is this place? Wang Chong shook his head and slowly got up from the ground. This is the Imperial Prison. A voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Don't tell me you still think we're in some brocade tent? This sentence immediately caused a burst of laughter. Imperial Prison? Wang Chong shuddered, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over him, and he suddenly sobered up. It was dark and damp, and a few torches glowed on the walls. Wang Chong glanced around and finally saw clearly that this was a prison cell. It was a prison cell with a long history, and the pillars of the cell were stained with blood. It was a prison cell that sent chills down one's spine. Even the air here was cold. A black fog floated in the air, and the dense aura of death left one shuddering. Imperial Prison? Imperial Prison! In that instant, countless thoughts flashed across his mind. Slowly, as though coming to a realization, Wang Chong calmed down and sat on the floor. Imperial Prison? Imperial Prison. I didn't expect this. In that instant, Wang Chong finally came to a realization. Everything that had happened before he fainted surfaced in his mind. Wang Chong only saw the golden guards of insignia entering, but he didn't expect them to be prison guards of the royal court. A single memorial actually angered the royal court and the Hu, resulting in him being sent to the imperial prison. This was something that Wang Chong didn't expect. The imperial prison was a place where prisoners on death row were kept. Few of those who entered would be able to walk out alive. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. At this moment, Wang Chong finally calmed down. If I live and die for the sake of the country, how can I avoid it because of misfortune or good fortune? If this is my fate, if the great Tang is destined to perish, then let the perishing begin with me. Sitting on the floor, Wang Chong's heart was beating furiously. There was no fear of death in his eyes, only deep sorrow. He had nothing to fear about death. If he coveted wealth, he wouldn't have submitted this memorial in the first place. Wang Chong only felt sorrowful. If no one had reminded him of the regional commander's system and the Hu strategy, it would still be understandable. But even though he had tried his best, and even his grandfather and big uncle had stood up for him, this was still the outcome. This made Wang Chong feel deeply defeated, dejected, and even sorrowful. Look at that new lad. He's petrified. He's actually sitting there motionlessly, as though he's made of wood. The surrounding prison cells burst into laughter. But Wang Chong just sat there motionlessly, as though he didn't hear anything. The laughter grew louder and louder, but it eventually died down, as though it was boring. Wang Chong sat in his prison cell, motionless. After an unknown period of time, rumbling footsteps suddenly sounded. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat, and he abruptly raised his head. A stern-looking middle-aged man, who had the air of an official, led 6 or 7 imperial prison guards with powerful auras and storm-like auras as they strode in from outside. Clang, clang, clang. The candlelight flickered, and the steel bars in front of Wang Chong clanged loudly. The cold-faced prison official stood in front of Wang Chong, staring coldly at him with an incomparably sharp gaze. "You're Wang Chong." The prison official glanced at the token in his hand and said, Wang Chong didn't deny it. "Since you are, tell me honestly." The prison official said coldly and harshly. "Tell me what?" Wang Chong finally raised his head. Presumptuous. You're already here, but you're still so stubborn. If you didn't commit any crimes, would you be here? You'd better tell me honestly, lest you suffer." The prison official raised his eyebrows and stared at Wang Chong, looking extremely displeased. I don't know what crimes I've committed, and I have nothing to tell you. Wang Chong said calmly. Ah, this kid is still stubborn. Kid, this is just a routine interrogation. You'd better tell me quickly, lest you suffer. There's no one here who doesn't tell you the truth. That's right. Trying to act tough in front of Lord Zhou, aren't you courting death? Lord Zhou has at least 100 ways to make you talk. The surrounding prisoners burst into laughter. The prisoners looked at Wang Chong with disdain, as though they could already see Wang Chong suffering. This prison official, Zhou Xing, was a ruthless official. In his hands, there wasn't a single person who wouldn't have their flesh torn apart. Even if they were made of steel, they wouldn't be able to endure it. He had hundreds of ways to torture others. Being stubborn in front of him would only lead to suffering, and the gains would not make up for the losses. Shut up! A ferocious roar reminiscent of a lion's roar echoed. In an instant, all of the prisoners fell into silence. The imperial prison was isolated from the world, and in here, Zhou Xing was the living King Yama. Everyone's life and death rested in his hands. No one dared to resist him. Have you really thought it through? Is there nothing to say? Zhou Xing stared at Wang Chong with a terrifyingly dark expression. Wang Chong shook his head, his expression calm and unperturbed. Very well. This is your first time here, so you don't know the rules. I'll give you a few more hours to think it through. If I still hear the same answer when the sun rises, I will be very unhappy. As he spoke, Zhou Xing didn't even bother concealing the threat in his eyes. At the end of his words, Zhou Xing made no attempt to conceal the threat in his eyes. Anyone who dared to defy him would have to suffer. If anyone dared to defy him, they would have to suffer a lot of physical pain. Zhou Xing led the prison guards away. After Zhou Xing left, countless sympathetic gazes turned toward Wang Chong. After Zhou Xing left, countless sympathetic gazes turned toward Wang Chong simultaneously. The last time Zhou Xing had such a gaze, 3 people died in the imperial prison. The last time such an expression appeared in Zhou Xing's eyes, 3 people had died in the imperial prison. An old prisoner looked at Wang Chong and sighed deeply. An old prisoner looked at Wang Chong and sighed deeply. But Wang Chong was oblivious to all of this. He sat cross-legged on the ground. His heart was like still water, without any movement. Amidst this silence, time trickled by slowly. After an unknown period of time, all Wang Chong heard was the sound of water dripping for 21,600 times. It felt like an eternity, and finally he heard familiar footsteps. The sun has risen. Wang Chong sighed. Opening his eyes, he saw Warden Zhou Xing and a few prison guards standing before him. But unlike the first time, Zhou Xing didn't say a single word this time. He just stared at Wang Chong with a bizarre expression, as though this was the first time he was seeing Wang Chong. You're Wang Chong? Zhou Xing tilted his head and asked. The same words, the same person, but the feeling it gave off was completely different. I am. Wang Chong was flabbergasted, but he still spoke in a voice as calm as before. The moment Wang Chong said those words, Zhou Xing's expression suddenly turned bizarre. It was a little surprised, a little confused, and a little fearful. Wang Gongzi, I apologize for offending you last night. Suddenly, Zhou Xing bowed deeply. In an instant, all of the prisoners who were waiting for Zhou Xing to arrive with his torture equipment were dumbfounded. What was going on? Zhou Xing was known for his ruthless methods. Why would he bow to a new prisoner? Everyone was dumbfounded, and their minds couldn't process the situation at all. You fellows, hurry up and prepare Wang Gongzi's meal. Can Wang Gongzi eat the food here? Zhou Xing kicked away his rice bowl as he bellowed at the prison guards beside him. After which, he turned to look at Wang Chong cautiously. Wang Gongzi, the imperial prison is damp. I'll arrange it for you, spread the blankets, and clean it up for you. A person like you shouldn't be here, and you shouldn't be cuffed. However, it's the will of the heavens, so I hope Gongzi can forgive me. Zhou Xing sneaked a glance at Wang Chong and said fearfully, What in the world happened? Wang Chong couldn't help but ask. Gongzi, please forgive me for not being able to tell you. Zhou Xing hesitated. After cleaning up the spoiled rice bowl, Zhou Xing didn't dare to stay any longer and left hurriedly. Only by investigating the matter would he know what kind of person he had locked up. In Zhou Xing's life, he had been locked up in all sorts of important officials. Be it a 9th rank or a 1st rank, an insignificant official collecting 5 buckets of rice, or a famous general in the royal court, Zhou Xing didn't care about any of them. In the imperial prison, there were only prisoners. And all of the prisoners had to listen to him. But the young man before him was too unique. In Zhou Xing's life, he had never met with such a situation. Even though he was a high official, he wasn't a general or a minister. However, he wasn't someone whom his small prison could lock up. Zhou Xing had intended to torture him, but after the incident in the royal court, he didn't dare to do so even if he was 100 times bolder. Such a person wasn't someone he could afford to offend. From dawn to noon, one group of golden-armored prison guards after another passed by Wang Chang's cell with all sorts of titles. Other than during torture, it was rare to see these prison guards here. But in a single day, the prisoners here had seen at least 30 to 40 royal guards. Everyone was trying their best to assess Wang Chong. Their gazes were filled with shock and fear. But none of them said a single word. After staying for a moment, they left hurriedly. The curiosity of the people in the prison cells grew. No one could understand what was going on. Even more so, they couldn't understand the background of this beardless young man. Chi. After an unknown period of time, when another group of prison guards passed by, one of them flicked his finger lightly, and a crumpled piece of paper immediately fell on the ground in front of Wang Chong. After they left, Wang Chong suddenly walked over and picked it up. Unfolding the crumpled piece of paper, Wang Chong took a look. With just a single look, Wang Chong's face immediately warped. From the moment he entered the imperial prison until now, this was the first time Wang Chong realized that the world outside the imperial prison had been turned upside down. Chapter 167. The memorials from the Hu generals requesting for Wang Chang's death had incited an unimaginable fury in the Han army. Everyone was enraged. The next morning, when thousands of memorials piled up in the royal court, all of the officials were frightened stiff. These memorials came from all over the border, and every single one of them was stamped with the seal of a general. Every single one of them was filled with rage. When hundreds and thousands of generals surrendered at the same time, that kind of enormous pressure was unimaginable to ordinary people. In the history of the Tang dynasty, there had never been such a situation. 4,000 of Han generals to side with a single person, speaking up for a single person. But Wang Chong had done it. Anyone who dares to instigate the death of Wang Chong will be my enemy. Such vehement words appeared in almost every single one of the memorials. Even though the words used were different, the meaning they conveyed was the same. Furthermore, there was no hint of compromise. Not only so, the hundreds of memorials from the Hu infuriated the entire Han army. For the first time, the Han generals as a group displayed their will. This wasn't just reflected in the memorials from the royal court, it was also reflected in their rage toward the Hu generals. Thousands upon thousands of military memorials flew toward the Hu generals by the borders, carrying the rage of the Han generals. All of the Hu generals who had impeached Wang Chong and demanded for Wang Chang's death received military memorials from the Han generals. Similar memorials also appeared before Gao Xianji, Fomin Linta, Geshu Han, and Sishan, and the other top-notch Hu generals. This matter had a huge impact on the Hu generals. This was the first time they felt the might of the Han generals. At noon, when a document signed by 100 generals appeared in the court, it added fuel to the fire and pushed the influence of the whole matter to the peak. The generals who appeared on this letter were no ordinary generals. They were the conferred generals of the Tang dynasty. From the Qin to the Western Han, only those generals with exceptional status and unique contributions could obtain a unique title, and they were known as conferred generals. The weight of these people was far greater than that of ordinary generals. General of suppressing waves, general of ships, general of destruction, general of 9 cauldrons, general of 10,000 crossbows, general of the sea, general of pacifying barbarians, general of the south, general of sweeping north, General of Southern Dipper, General of Dragon Cavalry, General of Charging Vanguard. These conferred generals were scattered all over the world. But because of Wang Chong, these generals were able to gather everyone's signatures within a single day. This was simply inconceivable. When almost all of the famous generals of the Tang dynasty appeared on this letter, the weight of this 100 generals' letter could be imagined. In the letter, the 100 conferred generals vouched for Wang Chong. At the same time, they questioned Geshu Han, Gao Xianji, Fomin Linta, and Sishun, and the others. How many Hu and Han generals were there in the army? There were 300,000 Han soldiers by the border, but only 100,000 or so Hu soldiers. The Han far outnumbered the Hu, and if a Han soldier were to die in battle, the Central Army would be able to send in reinforcements. But in the border, were the ones speaking the Han or the Hu? In the border armies, which were mainly made up of Han people, were there more Han generals or Hu generals? There were many things that, once revealed, would be completely different. The conflict between the Hu and Han had been going on for a long time. Anxi, Qixi, Baiting, and Longyu, which Geshu Han was in charge of, were all mainly Han. Their weapons, bows, arrows, rations, horses, and artillery were all supplied by the royal court. The commanders of these 4 important military forces were all Hu, and they were all under the control of the Hu. This matter had already caused a huge stir in the army. It was only because of the pressure from above that no one dared to bring it up. But now, because of Wang Chong, all of this was being vented. The officials in the royal court might not understand what Wang Chong had mentioned in the memorial, but to the generals in the military, what Wang Chong had written was exactly what they were thinking. On this point, they were completely on the same side as Wang Chong. In truth, Wang Chong's letter was also fighting for the interests of all the Han generals. If Wang Chong were to be executed by the royal court over this matter, no one would be able to accept it. The development of this matter had exceeded everyone's expectations. The Bureau of Military Personnel, Bureau of Punishments, the imperial censors, the entire royal court was in chaos. Now that things had developed to this point, it was no longer something that a single person could handle. Memorials in support of Wang Chong flew in from all directions to the royal court. At the same time, memorials requesting for Wang Chong's death to uphold the dignity of the Hu were also being sent to the royal court. Now that things had developed to this point, it was no longer something that anyone could stop. Even the likes of Geshu Han, Gao Xianji, and Fomin Linta could no longer restrain them. This matter concerned the interests of the entire Hu. In the 200-odd years since the founding of the Tang dynasty, this was the first time that the Hu and the Han were at loggerheads in the royal court. Neither side was willing to give in to the other. South of Western Shu Sword's Gate, rain continued to fall. Amidst the rain, oil fires blazed fiercely. A massive army of 800 li was densely packed in the undulating mountains. In the middle of the army, there was a huge mansion. Above it, there were 5 words written in golden letters, Annan Protectorate Manor. Every single word was as heavy as Mount Tai. The Tang dynasty had 10 protectorate generals, and while most of the influential armies were in the hands of the Hu, not all of the elites were in the hands of the Hu. In the Tang dynasty, just south of Western Shu Sword's Gate, there were 180,000 soldiers stationed. They were responsible for suppressing Mengshi Zhao and the Uzan Empire that was threatening to invade the southern highlands. In the Tang dynasty, the Annan Protectorate Manor could be considered as keeping a low profile. As battles weren't as frequent, and there weren't as many reports of victory to report, the Annan Protectorate Manor didn't have much presence in the royal court. However, this didn't mean that the 180,000 soldiers were worthless. An Anxi Protectorate Manor, a Qixi Protectorate Manor, and a Big Dipper Army Vice Commander. Do they really think that the Tang dynasty only has these few? Within the massive protectorate headquarters, a middle-aged man dressed in black heavy armor was seated cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was a chopping board cast from iron. The fire was roaring, and a middle-aged man dressed in black heavy armor sat cross-legged on the ground. On the chopping board was the latest intelligence from the royal court. Marshal, we have always kept a low profile and bided our time. Shouldn't we not get involved in the matters of the royal court this time around? Next to the middle-aged, short-haired man, a smart-looking advisor with a mustache said worriedly. He was the advisor of the Annan Protectorate Manor, as well as the military advisor of the Annan Protectorate Manor. Having worked together for more than 30 years, he knew his marshal well. As soon as the middle-aged man spoke, he knew that his marshal was about to get involved in this matter. We won't be able to gain anything from this. Instead, we'll attract the attention of the Anshi Protectorate Manor, Chishi Protectorate Manor, the Big Dipper Army Vice Commander, and all of the Who. I beseech Marshal to reconsider, the mustached advisor said uneasily. The storm in the royal court was simply too huge, so huge that he was feeling uneasy. He didn't think that it was a wise decision to get involved in this matter. Jin, you still understand. There are things that a man should do and not do. It's right for us to keep a low profile and avoid trouble. However, this matter is different. Haven't you noticed? At this moment, anyone who dares to stay out of this matter will become everyone's enemy. Zhangqiu Jianqiong chuckled. There was a sharpness in his eyes that belied his appearance. Zhangqiu was a compound surname. Even though it sounded like a Hu, Zhangqiu Jianqiong was a Han through and through. Zhangqiu was a later surname, just like Chao, which didn't exist in the original 100 family surnames. But regardless of whether it was a compound or a compound surname, Zhangqiu Jianqiong was undoubtedly a Han, and he was the powerful southern protector general of the Tang dynasty. His standing wasn't beneath that of Anshi's Gao Xianji, Qishi's Fomen Linta, or the Big Dipper Army's Geshu Han. Do you still not understand the meaning behind the joint name of the 100 family generals? Jiyan, this is no longer a matter of Wang Chang's life or death. Rather, it is a conflict of interests between the Han and Hu. Whoever dares to play tricks and stay out of this matter will lose their standing in the military. Jichen, your scheme isn't bad, but you're still lacking in the grand scheme of things. Zhangqiu Jianqiong said calmly. Unknowingly, an imposing aura that felt as vast as the mountains and the sea flowed out from his body, distorting even the flames and space in the hall. The military advisor, whom Zhangqiu Jianqiong addressed as Jin, was taken aback. For a moment, he was speechless, and a contemplative look appeared on his face. Zhangqiu Jianqiong chuckled, but he didn't say anything. In his mind, he recalled the young man he had met in the capital. Just what kind of young man could have the courage to write such an incisive memorial? Did Duke Jiu teach him? Zhangqiu shook his head. Given Duke Jiu's personality, he would never stoop to such a thing. Could it be Wang Zhen? That person from the Wang clan wielded great authority in the royal court. If it wasn't Duke Jiu, it was most likely to be him. But did Wang Zhen have the courage to do so? Zhangqiu shook his head once more. He had met Wang Zhen a few times in his younger days. Lord Wang was definitely a far-sighted person, and his political acumen was formidable. But it was precisely for this reason that he found it even more difficult to write such a memorial. If even he couldn't write such a spirited memorial, how could he possibly teach his nephew? At this point, Zhangqiu couldn't help but sigh deeply. He had roughly understood the truth. To think that our Tang dynasty would have such a valiant figure. So what if I, Zhangqiu, put down my principles and support you? Zhangqiu Jianqiong sighed deeply as he stretched out his right hand. Bring me my brush. I'll be writing this memorial myself. Walala. Chapter 168. Zhangqiu Jianqiong wasn't the only one paying attention to the affairs of the royal court. While Zhangqiu Jianqiong's great kite was flying toward the capital, in a massive tent in the northeast of the Tang dynasty, golden cups, silver bowls, and tiger pelts were placed on the floor. In the tent, an energetic figure in his 40s was chuckling heartily as he feasted on meat and wine. He exuded a ferocious and intimidating aura. Ziyi, have you seen the documents on the table? These are the signatures of 100 generals. They are all pleading for me, the great general who supports the empire, the Eastern Protector General, the founding Duke of Southern Sun Commandery. The armors of the people in the tent vibrated and their long hair danced in the wind. They were clearly in a good mood. Is Marshal really going to interfere in this matter? Back then, a single sentence from Duke Jiao delayed Marshal for nearly 20 years at the border. Not too far away, separated by a basin of charcoal, a scholarly middle-aged Confucian general was sitting cross-legged. His mustache drooped down from his lips, giving off the impression of a modest gentleman. He was Zhang Shogui's lifelong friend, Wu Ziyi, who had gone through life and death with him. The two of them had joined the army together. From the Tang dynasty's Longxi garrison to Guazhou to the current Eastern Protector General, intimidating the Shi tribe, Khitans, and even the distant Turks, the two of them had always been the best partners, and they were best friends who had transcended life and death. Right now, the Big Dipper Great General Geshu Han, who had risen to fame in the imperial court and was known as the 7 Stars of the Big Dipper, Geshu brings his saber at night, was only plowing the land he had once plowed. In terms of experience, Geshu Han was just a junior. Before an elder like Zhang Shogui, he had nothing to show off. There weren't many valiant generals in the Tang dynasty, and there were even fewer who could suppress Geshu Han. However, Zhang Shogui was definitely one of them. This was also the reason why so many conferred generals' documents were flying toward the protectorate of the Northeast. In the Tang dynasty, there were only a few generals who could stand against the powerful who like Gao Xianji, Fomin Linta, Geshu Han, and Insishun. Grand General who supports the nation, Zhang Shogui, was definitely one of the best. As for conferred generals, while their status was higher than that of ordinary generals, they were still lacking in terms of weight. Zhang Jiuling took advantage of his seniority and ruined my path to becoming a minister. How could I not remember that? Hearing Wu Ziyi's words, Zhang Shogui's face darkened. Zhang Shogui knew that Wu Ziyi was talking about the past events of the Holy Emperor 23 years ago. At the time, Zhang Shogui had just arrived in Yuzhou, and he had dealt a heavy blow to the Khitan tribes that were at the height of their power and threatening Yuzhou and the Tang dynasty to the northeast. Coupled with Long You's many defeats of Uzun, Zhang Shogui's reputation was like the sun in the sky, and there was even a rumor that he was the Minister of Desire. Alas, Wang Jiuling believed that Zhang Shogui was truly too young and immature. Although he was used to war, he might not be able to take on the role of prime minister and manage the imperial court. Thus, when the Holy Emperor asked, he was rejected by Wang Chang's grandfather, Wang Jiuling. He said, "Shogui has just defeated the Khitans, and your majesty is already the prime minister. If we were to destroy the Shi and the Turks, how would your majesty reward us?" This directly shattered Zhang Shogui's dream of becoming prime minister. If not for this, Zhang Shogui might have become the youngest prime minister in the history of the Tang dynasty. The hatred in Zhang Shogui's heart was unimaginable. However, even though that Wang clan brat isn't worth saving, that fellow Fomin Linta is even more despicable. Could it be that with so many people pleading for me to make a move, I can humiliate that person from the Wang clan and crush that fellow Fomin Linta's reputation? What's there to be against it? Zhang Shogui suddenly burst into laughter. Wang Jiuling was known as Duke Jiao, and he was highly respected in the imperial court. Although Zhang Shogui was displeased that Wang Jiuling had foiled his plans back then, he couldn't deal with such a person as forcefully as he did on the battlefield. Saving his grandson was the best way to humiliate him. As for Fomin Linta, there were few in the Tang dynasty who could compare to Zhang Shogui in terms of seniority, and Fomin Linta was definitely one of them. Back then, when Zhang Shogui wasn't the Anong Protector General, and he was still fighting against Uzun in Longyu, Guazhou, Qixi, and Anxi intersected, and the two of them didn't come into conflict. This time, Fomin Linta was making a huge fuss, and Zhang Shogui couldn't stand it anymore. Compared to the prospect of teaching Fomin Linta a lesson, saving Duke Jiao's grandson, Wang Chong, wasn't a big deal. However, given the current situation, the Hu and Han generals are at odds with one another in the royal court because of that child. We are in Yuzhou, and unlike the Han generals in other places, we have many Hu generals and soldiers under us. If we were to interfere recklessly, I'm afraid that our subordinates might start a rebellion, and that would be disadvantageous to us. Wu Zi frowned and said worriedly. The more he knew about the happenings in the royal court, the more worried he was. Given the current situation, it wasn't wise for them to interfere recklessly. Unexpectedly, when Wu Ziyi's words fell into Zhang Shougui's ears, he burst into laughter. Ah, Ziyi, why are you learning from those people in the royal court? What Han and Hu generals, what fools? In my Yuzhou, before me, Zhang Shougui, there are no Hu or Han. There are only those who obey me and those who don't. Horse, what do you think? Zhang Shougui suddenly turned his head around, and his eyes were as sharp as lightning. Not too far away, he saw a plump Hu in his early 20s eating grass on the ground. Under Zhang Shougui's gaze, the plump Hu trembled, and cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Fear was written all over his face. Commander is right. We the Hu are horses. How can horses compare to you? Fomenlinta, Gao Xinji, and the others are the same as me. We are horses, horses. As he spoke, he stuck out his bottom and chewed on the grass in his mouth. He mimicked horse neighs neighing and fawning. Haha. Seeing the fawning look on the Hu, Zhang Shougui burst into laughter. Even Wu Ziyi couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of it. Those who obey me can live, and those who don't will die. Zhang Shougui laughed. He suddenly whipped out a token from his waist and threw it out of the tent. Outside the tent, a cold gale blew. More than 100 bound Shi, Khitan, and Turkic who stood amidst the bone-chilling wind. Behind them were more than 100 executioners. Kill. Their heads fell to the ground, and fresh blood spurted out. The 100 Shi, Khitan, and Turkic who fell to the ground like wooden pillars. They struggled for a moment before coming to a stop. Soon, armored soldiers came over and dragged their corpses away. They threw them into a ditch and buried them. The thick stench of blood wafted through the rain. Here, the grass on the ground was red. To the east of the Tang dynasty, to the east of Yuzhou, Zhang Shougui was an existence that could stop a child from crying. Just as he had said, in Yuzhou, in front of Zhang Shougui, there were no Hu, no Han. There were only those who obeyed and those who disobeyed. Those who obeyed would live, and those who disobeyed would die. The tent was torn apart, and that Hu who had been pretending to be a horse and sucking up to Wang Chong flew out like a white meatball. Bring Ashina along? Come on, we 2 hunters, let's get to work together. If we don't capture 200 Shi and Khitan Hu today, 2 more people will be sleeping in that ditch. Don't think about escaping. You should know that you won't be able to. That ice-cold voice was even more bone-chilling than the chilly wind. Almost as the 2 who scrambled out of Zhang Shougui's tent, a crow shot out of the tent like an arrow, flying against the clouds toward the Tang dynasty's capital. Grand General assisting the nation Zhang Shougui, Anong Protector General. When Zhang Shougui's name appeared in the imperial court, he would become the most important bargaining chip for the Han generals. In the military world of the Tang dynasty, Zhang Shougui was a figure of great stature, one of the 2 legendary existences of the Central Plains in the generation of the current Holy Emperor. However, there was another person in the military world who was even more important than Zhang Shougui, with even more illustrious achievements. When Yozhou's Protector General, Anong Protector General Zhang Shougui's memorial appeared in the imperial court, countless people immediately turned to this Han military leader. To the east of the Tang dynasty's imperial palace, in the Crown Prince's imperial tutor residence on Green Dragon Street, a square-faced, dignified, and resolute middle-aged man sat by the bedside, his brow furrowed. Although he didn't exude the slightest aura, the middle-aged man exuded the aura of someone who wielded supreme authority over the entire world. His every action, though casual, exuded an intimidating and respectful aura. In front of this middle-aged man, everyone could not help but lower their heads, not even daring to look him in the eye. They naturally felt a sense of respect. This person was the Crown Prince's imperial tutor, Wang Zhongxi. In the Tang dynasty, there were few people who could surpass the likes of Zhang Shougui, Fomenlinta, Gao Xianji, Geshu Han, and Insishun. Wang Zhongxi was definitely someone who could do this. The reason was simple. The current vice commander of the Big Dipper Army, Big Dipper Great General Geshu Han, had been groomed by him. Wang Zhongxi didn't hold any illustrious position in the military. In fact, he had already relinquished his military authority, and he only held the title of the Crown Prince's imperial tutor. But in terms of the positions he had held, There was no one in the entire Tang dynasty who could match up to him. Daizhou governor, imperial censor, Hedong military commander, Yunhui general, Zhuiyulan general, and even the northern protector general, Qixi protector general, eastern protector general, southern protector general. He had held all of these positions. In terms of achievements, there was no one in the entire Tang dynasty who could match up to him. When he was the Eastern Protector General, he defeated the Shi and the Khitans. When he was the Northern Protector General, he swept through the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, defeating them and winning 20 years of peace. When he was in Longyu, he fought his way up to the Uzan Plateau, forcing even the monks of the Great Snowy Mountain to deal with him. In Wang Zhongxi's life, other than the western region Suiye City, he had fought every single opponent he could lay his hands on. However, he was different from the other generals. Wang Zhongxi had never been a utilitarian. In every single battle, he would bring his military authority with him and return with it. On the battlefield, he was an invincible marshal, but when he returned, he would return as a nameless figure, carrying only the title of the crown prince's imperial tutor. Furthermore, unlike the other generals, Wang Zhongxi was compassionate towards his soldiers. Even though he had contributed greatly to the war, he wasn't willing to start one. Thus, throughout his life, Wang Zhongxi tried his best not to start a war. At the same time, Wang Zhongxi was more than willing to leave the opportunity to gain fame and experience to the younger generation. This was also the reason why he was respected in the royal court. More importantly, even though Wang Zhongxi had made so many contributions and defeated so many opponents, he was still only 50 years old. Chapter 169. Old Master, someone has come to request an audience. Just as Wang Zhongxi was sitting on the edge of the bed, frowning in contemplation, an old servant dressed in green walked in with a stack of visiting cards. "Sai, let them go. I won't grant them an audience." Wang Zhongxi sighed deeply. He was in a dilemma regarding the matter of Wang Chong. Unlike many people, Wang Zhongxi did not have any opinion of the Hu and the Han. In his life, he had fought side by side with the Han and also fought side by side with the Hu. If not for that, he wouldn't have promoted Geshu Han. It was impossible for him to stand against his former subordinate, Geshu Han, and the Hu generals who had fought alongside him. It was also impossible for him to stand on Geshu Han's side and oppose the Han generals. Thus, Wang Zhongxi was in a dilemma. "Elder Zhang, please help me deliver a private letter. This child doesn't have a bad heart. Advise His Majesty to stay if possible. This is the only thing I can do." Wang Zhongxi pondered for a long time before finally sighing deeply. "Yes, old master," the old servant replied before returning to his study. With the appearance of the Southern Protector General Zhang Chou Jinxiong and the Eastern Protector General Zhang Shougui, the situation in the royal court had become extremely tense. The conflict between the Hu and Han had become extremely tense. On this matter, neither side could back down. Everything had been laid out in the open, and everyone was waiting for the imperial court's verdict, waiting for the sage emperor's verdict. Yet, from noon to sunset, there was no news from the palace. Even though all of the Hu and Han generals had submitted memorials, even though countless memorials were flying in from all directions, even though countless officials were arguing with one another, the Holy Emperor still didn't express any opinion. As for the request to execute Wang Chong, the Holy Emperor neither agreed nor objected. On this matter, the Holy Emperor's attitude was so secretive that no one knew what he was thinking. The sage emperor's attitude caused many people to feel puzzled and uneasy. "My lord, my husband said he won't see you. Please go back." In the evening, the last rays of the sun disappeared on the horizon. Outside the Four Quarters Embassy, an imperial army commander waved his hands at Yao Guangyi, who had been waiting beneath a tree for a very long time. "Did he really say he didn't want to see you?" Yao Guangyi frowned as he confirmed once again. "Gone. Old Xianggong has ordered that within 3 days, no one is to be seen, including Darren." The imperial army general said solemnly. "How could this be?" Yao Guangyi muttered to himself as he looked at the tightly shut door in the distance. This was the second time he had come here, but it was the second time he was rejected. Initially, Yao Guangyi had the right to enter the east courtyard of the Four Quarters Embassy as he pleased. However, just yesterday, his rights were revoked. What's going on? Why doesn't father want to see me? Yao Guangyi's heart was in turmoil. The affair of the third son of the Wang family, Wang Chong, has caused an uproar in and out of the imperial court. All the Hu and Han generals are involved. Initially, he wanted to seek his father's opinion. It was one thing for Wang Zhen and the others to be given the cold shoulder at the Four Quarters Embassy, but to think that they would be given the cold shoulder as well. His father had never refused to meet him before. In Yao Guangyi's memory, this was the first time this had happened. For the first time, Yao Guangyi felt troubled. "Old master, what do we do now?" A family general asked by the side. "Let's return first. We'll return tomorrow." After a moment of contemplation, Yao Guangyi waved his hands and left the Four Quarters Embassy. The darkness of the night caused the heated discussions in the day to cool down. However, behind the veil of the night, there was an even more intense commotion. "Big brother, this is Lord Zhao Fengchen." In the royal palace, under the cover of the night, Wang Chang's uncle, Li Lin, walked over with Zhao Fengchen in tow. All of the patrolling imperial army soldiers had been moved away, and Li Lin and Zhao Fengchen's men had been replaced. "Lord Wang." Zhao Fengchen walked over with widened strides. This was the first time he was meeting the eldest son of the Wang clan outside of the royal court. "I'll be troubling you." Wang Zhen walked over with large strides, unable to conceal the worry in his eyes. The palace gates would close at night, but as an influential official of the royal court, Wang Zhen had the authority to enter the royal palace to submit memorials at any time. This time, Wang Zhen had made use of this authority to enter. But even so, Wang Zhen couldn't remain in the royal palace for too long. "General Zhao, how is my nephew, Wang Chong, doing?" Wang Zhen asked anxiously. From the first day, Wang Chong had been locked in the imperial prison for 2 days. In these 2 days there was no news at all. Even an influential official of the royal court like him was unable to find anything. Wang Zhen couldn't help but worry. His brother-in-law Li Lin served in the imperial army, and he was acquainted with Zhao Fengchen. As the imperial prison was located in the imperial army, the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Thus, Wang Zhen thought of asking Zhao Fengchen for help. "There's nothing." Unexpectedly, Zhao Fengchen shook his head with a grim expression. "Our imperial army is familiar with the prison guards. In the past, as long as we greet them, we would be able to obtain some news. But this time, it's completely different. None of us are allowed to approach the imperial prison. All prison guards are forbidden from leaving the underground, and anyone who disobeys will be killed on the spot. I have been in the royal palace for decades, and this is the first time I've encountered such a situation. There's something fishy about this matter. How could this be?" Wang Zhen exclaimed in shock. Seeing Wang Zhen's expression, Zhao Fengchen sighed. He had a good impression of Wang Chong. In the past, he had even asked Li Lin to invite him into the royal palace for a chat. This time, Zhao Fengchen had been paying close attention to Wang Chang's imprisonment. But for some reason, Zhao Fengchen was unable to approach the imperial prison at all. No news could be sent out from the imperial prison either. It was as if it was a bottomless black hole. "However, it's not as if there's nothing I can do." Gritting his teeth, Zhao Fengchen suddenly said, "There's a prison guard in the imperial prison. He used to be my subordinate, and he was nearly executed for violating the laws of the imperial army. I was the one who saved him. I've already asked him to find a way to send some news out. It should be about time." What? All of a sudden, the cry of a child sounded from above. A massive black silhouette spread its wings and glided over. "It's an owl." Wang Zhen raised his head and recognized it. The royal palace of the Tang dynasty was built on the ruins of the former Sui dynasty. It was said that after the Sui dynasty fell, a large number of rats gathered in the ruins. Even though the Tang dynasty had tried to eradicate these rats when it was first established, some of them still managed to survive. After a long period of time, these rats had already adapted to life in the royal palace. They grew larger and bolder, and they weren't afraid of the pressure exerted by martial artists. even though they didn't dare to approach the center of the royal palace, where the Son of Heaven resided. Given the size of the royal palace, the edges of the royal palace became their territory. In order to deal with these rats, the royal palace had specially raised a bunch of owls to capture them. Wang Zhen had only heard of this rumor, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. To think that the rumor was true. Pada! The owl flew over, and its claws loosened. Pada! A black, mangled object was tossed over. It was a massive rat the size of a kitten. It's a rat from the imperial prison. Zhao Fengchen hurried over and cut open the stomach of the rat. As expected, there was a paper slip inside. Taking a look, Zhao Fengchen's complexion suddenly turned awful. How is it? Wang Zhen's heart tightened. My men have checked all the possible locations, and Wang Chong isn't in the imperial prison. What? In an instant, Wang Zhen's face warped. Inside the imperial prison, Wang Chong came and went as he pleased. Even though his hands were bound by chains, making it impossible for him to struggle free, Wang Chong realized that his origin energy wasn't restricted at all. Thus, Wang Chong decided to cultivate the little yin-yang art here, opening up his meridians and acupoints for his origin energy circulation. Even though he was cut off from the world, Wang Chong was still able to receive news from the prison guards. The alliance of the 100 generals, the Anong Protector General and the Anong Protector General supporting him, the officials of the royal court falling out with one another, the old censor He Tai suddenly appearing in the royal court and slapping Xiao He and the other censors who accused him of criticizing the royal court, and no one dared to retaliate. This news made Wang Chong feel vindicated, amused, and moved. With so many people standing up for him, the risk he took to hand over the memorial wasn't in vain. From the looks of it, these royal guards were also standing on his side. Wang Chong tried to make use of these royal guards to send a few notes out to inform his family that he was safe. However, the palace guards who were previously well informed immediately waved their hands, their faces filled with fear. After a few more attempts, Wang Chong gradually realized that he could only enter but not leave the information here. Just as Zhang Xian was deep in thought, a scream suddenly sounded from the next cell. Frowning, Wang Chong immediately turned his gaze over. In the cell next door, a group of people was beating up a person. You're not speaking the truth? I'll teach you a lesson if you don't speak the truth. The group of people punched and kicked as they cursed. The imperial prison was shrouded in darkness. After staying here for too long, one's personality would become distorted. Wang Chong had seen such beatings a few times already. Just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly heard a scream of agony. I'm not lying, my name is really Zhang Munin. I'm just a lowly official in the Nanling Mountains. Bwang. This voice sounded as though a bolt of lightning flashing by his ears. Wang Chong's body jolted, and he abruptly turned his head around. You still dare to say that you're not speaking nonsense? What kind of place is the imperial prison? You're just a lowly official by the borders. How can you be locked up here? Beat him up. The group of people cursed. Stuff. Chapter 170. Release him. Wang Chong glared at the crowd coldly and ordered. In an instant, the entire room fell silent. The prison guards stared at Wang Chong fearfully. Brat, why do you have to interfere in other people's business? A prison guard who seemed to be the leader of the group cursed, but he didn't dare to look at Wang Chong. Instead, he lowered his head to avoid the latter's gaze. Hurry up and leave, old fogey. Count yourself lucky. While speaking, he shoved the prison guard fiercely, as though venting his anger. Even though Wang Chong was young, everyone in the imperial prison knew that he wasn't someone they could afford to offend. As if they had eaten the wrong medicine, all of the prison guards were extremely concerned about him. What in the world was this? Ignoring the prisoners, Wang Chong turned his attention to the filthy minor official who had been beaten up. His curiosity piqued. You're Zhang Munin? Wang Chong looked at the prison guard with a bizarre gaze. That's right. Gongzi, thank you for your help. The prisoner spoke in a genteel manner. He even clasped his hands and bowed with a grateful expression on his face. His entire body was emaciated, and his face was filthy. Only his eyes seemed to be spirited. Gong Changzhang? Mu as in love and yen as in age? Wang Chang's gaze grew even more bizarre. You're from the Lingnan region, and you used to be an agriculture official? That's right. Zhang Munian was astonished, but he still clasped his hands and replied. At the same time, he subconsciously assessed Wang Chong. A subtle glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. You were imprisoned for embezzling 20,000 gold taels? Wang Chong stared at Zhang Munian and asked abruptly. How did you know? Zhang Munian blurted out as his face warped in shock. A single stone raised 1,000 ripples, and Wang Chong's heart jolted in shock. It's really him. Wang Chong widened his eyes in disbelief as he stared at the prisoner before him. He couldn't believe that Zhang Munian, whom he had requested the king of Song to save, would be here. Since Zhang Munian had committed a crime, he should be under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Military Personnel. Why would he appear in the imperial prison? Could it be that he was not in the imperial prison, but in the prison of the Ministry of War? But how was that possible? Wang Chang's eyes were filled with bewilderment. He couldn't understand why the person he was looking for would appear here. This was simply too illogical. Who exactly is young master? Zhang Munian replied grimly. No matter how slow he was, he could tell that Wang Chong seemed to have a deep understanding of him. Do you want to go out? Wang Chong didn't answer. Instead, he said with a straight face. It's easier said than done. Zhang Munian sighed. This is the imperial prison. There were only those who died and not those who survived. If young master has the heart and means, please help me bring something out. Hee, don't worry. I'll find a way to bring you out. Seeing that the others were looking at him curiously, Wang Chong didn't say much. Soon, Wang Chong turned around and continued cultivating his little yin-yang art. He could already sense that he was about to clear another acupoint. In the blink of an eye, it was already the third day. This was the third day that Wang Chong had been locked up in the imperial prison. Yet, the Holy Emperor didn't reveal his stance on the matter. All of the memorials flew into the royal palace, and the Holy Emperor accepted them all. But they were all kept in the palace. This attitude of his left all of the officials feeling that he was an unfathomable expert. But not only did the voices calling for Wang Chong's death not die down, they even grew louder. All of the Hu generals and Han officials who had a good impression of them were demanding for Wang Chong's death. At the same time, the voices of the Han generals who were protecting Wang Chong weren't soft at all. Furthermore, while the Hu generals were calling for Wang Chong's death, the Han generals were also discussing the issue of the Hu by the borders that Wang Chong mentioned in the memorials. The borders were mainly made up of Han soldiers, and the Han generals promoted the Hu to show fairness. But the Hu only knew how to promote and protect the Hu. As a result, the number of low-level Hu generals by the borders increased. Without an opportunity, the Han would be unable to stand out. Without an opportunity, the Han would be unable to temper themselves. Thus, there would be fewer and fewer Hu generals by the borders. This was no longer a mere prospect, but a fact. What Wang Chong said was becoming a reality in the Tang dynasty. And the most obvious example was when a group of Han soldiers fought to the death on the battlefield. But because their leader was a Hu, the greatest credit would always belong to the Hu. On the other hand, the low-level Han soldiers could only eat 2 pieces of meat and drink 2 bowls of wine, and they would still be considered soldiers. As time went on, without motivation, they would be unable to display their fighting prowess. Thus, it would be hard for them to stand out. This was no longer a hypothesis, but a reality. Thus, no one understood this problem better than the Han generals of the Tang dynasty. The Tang dynasty's Baiting and Anxi were frequently embroiled in battles, but there weren't many battles in other areas. Thus, a large amount of fresh blood flowed into those areas. The entire Tang dynasty was using their own flesh and blood to support the Hu in battle. Even the commanders by the borders and the soldiers at the bottom were all Hu. This was abnormal. When 2 sides met on a narrow path, the courageous would emerge victorious. The Hu were more valiant in battle, and naturally, they would be in a higher position. The weak were prey to the strong, and wasn't it only natural for the stronger to be the leader? Towards the dissatisfaction of the Han, the Hu generals also refuted it with logic. In the royal court, the Holy Emperor sat on his throne, unmoving. The Holy Emperor listened to the entire royal court from the start to the end. At the very end, when the officials were debating intensely, the Holy Emperor turned around and left without saying a single word. His Majesty has decreed that he will announce the verdict on Wang Chong tomorrow. After the Holy Emperor left, a eunuch dressed in cloud-embroidered robes appeared in the royal court and announced the decree of the Holy Emperor with a sharp voice. Long. His words caused an uproar in the royal court. After the eunuch's announcement, the debate regarding Wang Chong reached its peak. The capital was in an uproar. Regardless of whether it was the Han or the Hu, everyone was looking forward to the verdict on the very last day. Grandfather, you have to save Big Brother. Big Brother isn't a bad person. At the same time, at a place where no one was paying attention to, a 4 to 5-year-old plump boy kneeled before the Su residence, crying and pleading loudly. This was already the third day that Xiao Jianjian had appeared here. Children were innocent, and they believed that Wang Chong wasn't a bad person. So Yongsun believed that he could save Wang Chong, so they came to plead every single day. Even their heads were bleeding from the kowtows. Sigh, don't worry. Your big brother won't die. After a long while, an elderly voice sounded from behind the tightly shut gates of the Su residence. Grandfather. Little Jianjian raised his head abruptly with a look of pleasant surprise. This was the first time in the past few days that Su Zheng had responded to him. Your big brother is fine, but you are truly a foolish child. Come in. The tightly shut gates of the Su residence finally revealed a sliver of a gap. So Yongsun's snow-white head appeared, and a hand reached out to pull Xiao Jianjian in. Old master, the old master has summoned you. He wants you to head over now. What? I'll head over right now. Yao Guangyi was astonished. Tomorrow was the day where the fate of Wang Chong would be decided, and he was about to look for the old master. He didn't expect that the old master would summon him. Submit a memorial now and publicly declare your support for the Wang clan and Wang Chong. The oil lamp in the room was dim. The moment old master Yao saw Yao Guangyi, he immediately went straight to the point. What? Yao Guangyi was taken aback. The Wang clan is our mortal enemy. It's one thing if we don't oppose them, but why do we have to support them? Yao Guangyi couldn't understand. Let me ask you, was it King Qi's intention for you to look for me a few days ago? Did you want me to publicly declare the execution of Wang Chong? Old Master Yao didn't reply. Instead, he asked about another matter. It was indeed King Qi's intention. Yao Guangyi was silent for a moment before he lowered his head and nodded. The old man was perceptive, and there was no need to hide anything in front of him. But if we were to do so, wouldn't we be going against King Qi? Yao Guangyi revealed a troubled expression. The one who supported the Hu and opposed Wang Chong the most was King Qi. You told King Qi what I said, right? Yao Guangyi didn't deny it. No wonder. Old Master Yao nodded, looking as if he had expected this. King Qi knew that the one who ruined his plans was Wang Chong, so naturally he wouldn't let him off so easily. Guangyi, you must understand. This isn't a question of whether we should go against King Qi or not. It's a question of whether King Qi should go against His Majesty. Guangyi, do you still not understand? The one we should support isn't the Wang clan, but His Majesty. If His Majesty doesn't wish for him to die, no one will be able to touch him. Old Master Yao sighed. But hasn't His Majesty made a decision yet? Yao Guangyi asked doubtfully. His Majesty's heart is hard to fathom, and he's becoming more and more like a sage. He's no longer the crown prince from back then. Old Master Yao suddenly sighed in his heart. Initially, I wasn't sure of His Majesty's intentions regarding this matter. This is also the reason why I didn't meet you. But after observing for 3 days, I have already confirmed His Majesty's intentions. Wang Chong won't die. Father, please guide me. With a stern expression, Yao Guangyi suddenly stood up and bowed, as though he was seeking guidance from his father. Do you still not understand? His Majesty is decisive in killing, and no one can refute his decisions. Regardless of whether it was the matter regarding Consort Taijin or the regional commander's incident. But if His Majesty really wanted to kill Wang Chong, do you think that he would wait till now? Old Master Yao chuckled as he tapped the ground in front of Yao Guangyi with his walking stick. Boom! A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Yao Guangyi's mind was originally a pile of paste, but at this moment, it was as though the clouds had been pulled out of the fog to see the moon. Under his father's guidance, some of the things that he didn't understand before suddenly became clear, and his mind became clear. Father, thank you for your guidance. I understand now. Yao Guangyi bowed respectfully and wholeheartedly. There were many things that had a difference between having someone to guide him and not having anyone to guide him. His father had followed the Holy Emperor for more than 40 years, and on this matter, Yao Guangyi knew that his father wouldn't make a mistake. Just that, father, if that's the case, how will the Holy Emperor appease the Hu by the borders? Let's see what His Majesty will do then. Chapter 171. Voila! Wang Chong was jolted awake by a flurry of footsteps. Raising his head, he saw a bright light at the end of the imperial prison. Amidst the dense sounds of footsteps, one of them was grand and bright, and it seemed to be especially special. Wang Chong had never felt such an aura before. It was majestic, and filled with the power of radiance, as though the sun was shining down on the world. Who is that? Wang Chong opened his eyes in astonishment. In just a moment, a majestic boot with cloud patterns seemed to have stepped out from the end of the corridor. In the blink of an eye, a burly and chubby eunuch dressed in a robe embroidered with clouds appeared. He looked like the reincarnation of the Maitreya Buddha. Behind him were the other eunuchs, chamberlains of imperial insignia, and the imperial prison guards. It seemed as though they were following his orders. This person, Wang Chong's eyebrows twitched. Looking at the plump and amiable eunuch, he was bewildered. Be it in his previous life or his current one, Wang Chong had never met this person before. But for some reason, Wang Chong had a feeling that this person had a powerful background. Wang Gongzi, you've suffered. I'm here to visit you on behalf of His Majesty. The plump eunuch walked up to Wang Chong's cell and said with a smile. Anyone who saw this person couldn't help but feel a sense of closeness toward him, as though he was their kin. Even though this was the first time they met, it felt as though they had known each other for a lifetime. Eunuch, you're being too courteous. Wang Chong replied calmly, but the feeling in his heart was getting more and more bizarre. Is Gongzi getting used to living here? The plump eunuch asked. What do you think? Wang Chong smiled bitterly. It's nothing for young people to suffer a little. Only those who can bear hardships can shoulder great responsibilities. The plump eunuch glanced at the gloomy imperial prison and chuckled. It's easier said than done. This was the only feeling Wang Chong had. However, Wang Chong had a good impression of this eunuch. Are you used to it, young master? The chubby eunuch continued. The food is not bad. Wang Chong still nodded his head. Although it was common to find rotten leftovers or even moldy food in the prison, Wang Chong had never eaten it before. Zhou Xing would always give Wang Chong a special set of food every time, which was completely different from the others. Because of this, although the prison was dark and damp, Wang Chong could still stay there. That's good. The chubby eunuch nodded his head and asked a bunch of questions. Wang Chong was curious, but he answered all of them. The feeling this eunuch gave him was completely different from the others. Since that's the case, I'll report back to His Majesty. Guards! The chubby eunuch suddenly clapped his hands lightly. A commotion broke out at the back of the crowd. It was at this moment that Wang Chong realized that there were two beautiful palace maids hidden at the back of the crowd. However, due to their short stature, they were blocked by the tall and sturdy chamberlains of imperial insignia, so he didn't notice them. This person actually brought palace maids in here? Wang Chong looked at the eunuch before him in shock. At the same time, he was also curious about the other party's identity. Even the Ministry of Punishment's prison forbade women from entering, needless to say, the imperial prison. To be able to bring palace maids into the imperial prison, this was no simple feat. Wang Gongzi, the imperial prison is cold. These pills are a token of His Majesty's goodwill. Gongzi, feel free to consume them. The chubby eunuch said. In the hands of the two palace maids was a silver plate each. On each of the silver plates, there was a brocade box for storing pills. Even without opening it, Wang Chong could sense that these 2 pills weren't ordinary. Wang Chong was bewildered. He was getting more and more uncertain about the intentions of this chubby eunuch. Could it be that he was just here to give him 2 pills? Thank you, Gong Gong. Wang Chong didn't stand on ceremony this time. He reached out and took the 2 boxes from the silver plates. Da-da-da. Just as Wang Chong was about to take the boxes, flurried footsteps sounded. Chamberlain of Imperial Insignia rushed over from the side. Gong Gong Gao, the Chamberlain of Imperial Insignia, swept his gaze across the surroundings and spotted the chubby eunuch. He walked over and whispered into his ear. Hearing the words of the Chamberlain of Imperial Insignia, Wang Chong's heart jolted. He lifted his head and looked at the chubby eunuch. It's him. A wave of shock surged through Wang Chong's heart. He suddenly realized the identity of the person before him. No wonder he said that he could represent His Majesty. No wonder he was able to bring a palace made into the imperial prison. Wang Chong didn't expect that he would meet this legendary existence in the imperial prison. Gong Gong. Wang Chong suddenly spoke up. Can I ask you for a favor? These words were out of everyone's expectations, and in an instant, everyone's gazes turned to look at him. Even the Chamberlain of Imperial Insignia, who had rushed in at the very end, looked over in astonishment. Gong Gong, what do you think? The eyebrows of the chubby eunuch twitched in surprise. Then, he stared at Wang Chong with interest. Gong Gong, can you find a way to release him? Wang Chong stretched out a finger and pointed to Zhang Munian in the cell next door. Hearing those words, Zhang Munian was dumbfounded. The other prisoners who were looking over curiously were also dumbfounded. Don't. Wang Gong Gong, get them to let me out as well. No. Why should I let him out? Let me out. I'm the one who should be let out. Lord, save me. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't deserve to die. I want to get out. But the prisoners in the cell immediately grew agitated, and they began shouting frenziedly. The eyebrows of the chubby eunuch twitched, and he harumphed coldly. In an instant, the temperature in the imperial prison plummeted. The prisoners, who had been grumpy just a moment ago, felt suffocated. A look of fear appeared in their eyes, and they immediately quietened down. Gong Gong, can you tell me why I want to save him? Only then did the chubby eunuch turn around and look at Wang Chong with interest. Clearly, Wang Chong's words had caught his attention. Locked in the imperial prison, the other party didn't want to let him out, but wanted to save another person. He couldn't help but feel curious. Because this person is beneficial to the empire. Wang Chong replied grimly. Oh. A grim expression finally appeared in the chubby eunuch's eyes. For the first time, he looked at Zhang Munian. The latter's eyes were widened, but the shock he felt wasn't any less than his. Gong Gong, can you tell me why? The chubby eunuch asked. If someone else had said those words, he might have laughed it off. But the young man before him, after witnessing the other party's astounding feats, even he didn't dare to underestimate the other party's words. Especially when Wang Chong said that this person is beneficial to the empire. I can't explain it clearly, but Gong Gong, you should trust me. Besides, he shouldn't be here in the first place. It was King Qi who, for his own selfish reasons, sent him here. Wang Chong replied calmly. In the prison, Wang Chong gradually got to know Zhang Munian, and he also learned some things regarding the latter. Zhang Munian should have been locked in the Bureau of Punishments prison. Some time ago, Zhang Munian was supposed to be transferred out, but for some reason he suddenly changed his mind and was escorted from the Bureau of Punishments to the imperial prison. From the very beginning, Zhang Munian was still confused about this matter, unable to make sense of what was going on. He couldn't understand what was going on. Just that, as he was a prisoner on death row, Zhang Munian didn't think too much into it. However, Wang Chong was different. After asking Zhang Munian about the timeline, Wang Chong finally understood what was going on. The King of Song had indeed helped him, and Zhang Munian's case was sent back to the Bureau of Punishments. But later on, Zhang Munian's case was rebuffed. Judging from the timing, it happened to be around the time when the King of Song was demoted, and King Qi intervened in the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments. King Qi might not know who Zhang Munian was, but he knew that there was nothing wrong with supporting the King of Song and opposing the King of Song. Thus, Zhang Munian's case was rebuffed. On top of that, he was sent to the imperial prison, which was even more heavily guarded. In other words, Wang Chong was the one who caused Zhang Munian's imprisonment. King Qi? The chubby eunuch frowned, and he seemed to have thought of something. I understand. Tell your warden that His Majesty wants this person. Bring him out. The chubby eunuch flicked his wrist and flashed a token. Wang Chong wasn't able to see the token clearly, but the other prison guards had a look of respect on their faces. It seemed like the token was an incredible object. The prison guards nodded and immediately opened the cell. They walked in, unlocked the shackles, and dragged Zhang Munian out from the cell. Putting aside Zhang Munian and the other prisoners, even Wang Chong was dumbfounded. He was more and more certain of the chubby eunuch's identity. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. Why did you release him but not me? I want to go out as well. Release me. The prison guards seemed to have received a huge blow. Their eyes reddened, and they grabbed onto the bars and bellowed furiously. Entering the imperial prison was equivalent to being a dead man. Shut up. Everyone quiet down. A few chamberlains of imperial insignia walked over and berated them. I still have matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. Lord Sun, I'll leave this to you. This time, the chubby eunuch didn't say anything. After leaving a few guards behind, he led Zhang Munian out of the imperial prison. Almost at the same time, a middle-aged man who looked like an official walked over. Lord Sun. Wang Chong stared at the other party in astonishment. This person was none other than Lord Sun Qian, who was in charge of finance in the royal court. Chapter 172. Sun Qian came prepared. He brought a brush and paper with him. Someone beside him also brought ink and inkstone, as though waiting for Wang Chong's explanation. Wang Chong looked at Sun Qian, and an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. Jinyuan notes was a question he mentioned at the end of the report he passed to the Holy Emperor. Wang Chong had long noticed that when he was buying and selling the Hyderabad ores and auctioning the Wuzi steel sword, the prices of the items reached hundreds of thousands of gold taels. Based on his calculations, the total weight of the notes reached hundreds of thousands of kilograms. The density of gold was high, such that even hundreds of thousands of kilograms of gold wouldn't be large in size. But it was still inconvenient. Once it involved large-scale transactions, it would have a serious impact on the economy. Not only that, with his advantage as a person from the future, Wang Chong acutely sensed the dangers and problems behind that gold standard. Gold was limited. If the mining of gold couldn't keep up with the development of the economy, it would severely restrict the economy. In other words, there wasn't enough money. In Wang Chong's memories from another time-space continuum, when there wasn't enough gold and silver, they would excavate large amounts of iron and copper ores to forge large amounts of copper coins. The disparity in the quantity of gold, silver, and copper coins would result in chaos in the currency system. Today, 1 tael of silver could be exchanged for 100 copper coins. Tomorrow, it might turn into 110, 120, or even more. This, in turn, contributed to the instability of the society. And in some dynasties, due to insufficient money, the central government would hand over the coinage to the local governments, and the local governments would privately create their own currency. Furthermore, it wasn't just the central continent. The problem of currency existed everywhere. In the other time-space continuum where Wang Chong was born, even the powerful and developed American kingdom couldn't help but call upon the world to establish the Bretton Woods system. In the end, he managed to decouple the relationship between currency and gold in one go. The main reason was that the gold standard would severely restrict the economy. Even the powerful American kingdom was restricted by the gold standard, needless to say, other countries. The Central Plains was currently welcoming its strongest era in history, and the Tang dynasty was flourishing and prosperous. After Wang Chong came into contact with it and participated in such a large transaction, he immediately sensed the crisis hidden under the calm surface of the Tang dynasty. This was also the reason why Wang Chong mentioned the currency issue in his memorial. Using the reputation of the country as a guarantee, the Jinyuan note was issued and the Jinyuan note was linked to gold. The first step was to allow people to freely exchange for gold. This way, once the initial confidence of the people was established, they would be able to issue Jinyuan notes on a large scale and completely replace gold. In the future, he could gradually dilute the gold content in the Jinyuan notes. Once everyone had gotten used to the Jinyuan notes, they would be able to release the restrictions on the Jinyuan notes being exchanged for gold. Gold would be completely withdrawn from the economic activities of society and placed under the custody of the empire. In this way, the Jinyuan notes could still be used to purchase gold, and the price would remain the same. Through this method, it would be more convenient for large transactions involving gold. Secondly, the empire could completely break free from the shackles of gold mining, and the economy would become more developed. The currency system was the foundation of social stability. Only with a stable currency could the society be stable. This was Wang Chong's suggestion. Wang Chong had only mentioned it in passing. He didn't expect the Holy Emperor to pay much heed to it. After all, in a feudal society, it was impossible for such a concept to be accepted, let alone implemented. Just that, Wang Chong didn't expect the Holy Emperor to listen to his suggestion. On top of that, he even sent the influential Lord Sun Qian, who was in charge of the finances of the royal court, to the imperial prison to question him. So, this is the true motive behind Eunuch Gao's trip? Wang Chong looked at Sun Qian as his heart pounded furiously. In that instant, he seemed to have understood something. Lord, feel free to ask me any questions you have. I'll do my best to cooperate with you. Wang Chong sat on the floor and said solemnly. Sun Qian nodded and began asking about every single matter in detail. His questions were extremely detailed, such as how to make the Jinyuan notes, what materials should be used, how to issue them, where to issue them, how much to issue them. There were also many other miscellaneous questions, some of which even Wang Chong hadn't thought of before. This left Wang Chong impressed by the meticulousness of these officials. Perhaps their thinking might be lacking, but when it came to handling specific matters, they were extremely meticulous. For a simple question regarding the Jinyuan notes, Wang Chong only wrote a few hundred words on it. Yet, Sun Qian spent more than 4 hours on it, writing more than 200 pages of 7,000 to 8,000 words. Gongzi Wang, thank you. I'll bring this matter to the royal court and discuss it with the other officials. Sun Qian's face was still as impassive as before, but Wang Chong noticed that his tone was much more polite than before, and his eyes were much gentler as well. Lord Sun, you're being too polite. Wang Chong smiled. Sun Qian nodded, and he left the imperial prison with a thick stack of papers. In the dead of the night, in the Four Quarters Embassy, a single lantern was lit. Father! Wang Zhen bowed respectfully. This was the first time he had seen his old man in the past few days. Sit. The old master stretched out his hand and knocked on the seat beside him. Wang Zhen nodded and sat down beside him. Are you still thinking about Chong'er's matter? The old master asked impassively. Yes. Tomorrow is the day of the sentencing, and I haven't been able to fall asleep. Wang Zhen said. Unlike the kidnapping of a commoner, the matter Wang Chong had committed this time was no small matter. With so many generals demanding for Wang Chong's death, even Wang Zhen felt powerless. Don't worry. Chong'er will be fine. The old master smiled faintly. Surprisingly, he wasn't as nervous as Wang Zhen. Tomorrow would be the day of the verdict. Initially, Wang Zhen had intended to have his old master submit a memorial to persuade the Holy Emperor. In the Wang clan, only he had this ability. But hearing the old master's words, Wang Zhen found himself at a loss for words. Father, are you serious? Wang Zhen said agitatedly as he subconsciously grabbed his father's hand. You don't have to worry about him. The fact that this child was chosen by the Holy Emperor was also his good fortune. In the future, with this fortuitous encounter, even if I'm no longer around, I'll be able to help you. Our Wang clan doesn't have to worry about losing the Emperor's favor. Duke Jiu smiled. Wang Zhen stared blankly at his father, his mind unable to process the situation. Wang Chong was locked up in the dungeon, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Moreover, with so many Hu generals opposing his execution, it was unknown whether Wang Chong would be fine the next day. But the old man actually said that this was Wang Chong's good fortune? What was going on? Even though Wang Zhen had been in the royal court for many years, he was still unable to react to Duke Jiu's words. Do you still not understand? By locking Chong'er in the dungeon, His Majesty is protecting him. He isn't punishing him. Think about it carefully. When did Wang Chong get locked up? It was precisely when Chong'er's memorial infuriated the Hu, but the matter didn't reach its peak. Furthermore, if His Majesty didn't lock Chong'er in the dungeon, do you think that you would still be able to sit here quietly? Duke Jiu said calmly. His eyes shone with wisdom and insight, as though he had seen through the ways of the world. Seated in his seat, Wang Zhen was stunned. When Wang Chong was locked up in the dungeon, all he could think of was a way to save him. He didn't think that there would be such a twist. Instinctively, Wang Zhen felt that his father's words weren't without reason. On the second day after Wang Chong was locked up, the matter spiraled out of control. If Wang Chong hadn't been locked up in the dungeon, the Wang clan would have long been thrown into a huge mess. Every day, there would be countless people knocking down the gates of the Wang clan to question them. But it was precisely because Wang Chong was locked up in the dungeon that the Wang clan managed to avoid the eye of the storm. On top of that, it also caused the entire royal court to be filled with sympathy for Wang Chong. This was one of the reasons why so many Han generals stood up for Wang Chong. If Wang Chong hadn't been locked up, it would have been impossible for him to achieve such an effect. The situation might turn out to be even worse for Wang Chong than it was now. It's a blessing for Chong'er to be locked up in the dungeon. It'll be beneficial to him in the future. To receive the grace of the emperor, this was something that many people couldn't even dream of, even if they were to contribute greatly to the country. However, it wasn't wise for too many people to know of this matter. Otherwise, it would be a disaster instead of a blessing. That's why I've been refusing to meet you all for the past few days. Duke Jiu said calmly. I see. Wang Chong heaved a long sigh of relief. The doubts that had plagued him for the past few days had finally been resolved. It was no wonder why his father had been avoiding him all this while. It was no wonder why his father chose to remain silent on such a huge matter despite the Hu's demand for Wang Chong's death. Even though he found it hard to believe, he knew that his father wouldn't lie on such a matter. Go back and have a good rest. Tomorrow will be the day when the Holy Emperor announces his verdict. If I'm not wrong, that person from the Yao clan should be submitting a memorial in support of Chong'er tomorrow morning. Duke Jiu stroked his beard with a smile. How could this be? Wang Zhen abruptly lifted his head in shock. Duke Jiu chuckled, but he didn't explain this time. The moon set, and the sun rose. Finally, it was time for everyone's attention. Regardless of whether it was the Hu by the borders, the Han generals of the Tang dynasty, or the officials of the royal court, everyone was looking forward to the verdict of the Holy Emperor. To most people, this wasn't just a matter of Wang Chong's life or death. It involved the authority and standing of the Hu and Han generals in the Tang dynasty. By the decree of the heavens, the emperor declares the regional commanders' system will continue to be implemented. Regardless of whether it's Hu or Han, they will be able to assume the position. After the royal court has agreed on it, it will be officially implemented. As for Wang Chong, even though the memorial he wrote was biased, it wasn't without merit. The proposal of the Jinyuan note is beneficial to the country and the people. Thus, he will be spared from death. However, to serve as a warning to others, he will be sentenced to 3 months of imprisonment. End of the decree. News of the decree shook the world. Regardless of whether it was Hu or Han, everyone cheered. To the Hu, it was a huge improvement that the regional commanders' system wasn't abolished. On top of that, a Hu could be appointed as a regional commander. This also showed how highly the royal court regarded the Hu generals. And to the Han generals, even though so many Hu generals requested for Wang Chong's death, he was only sentenced to 3 months of imprisonment. This was a huge victory for them. More importantly, the regional commander's system and the strategy of utilizing Hu were only left with the regional commander's system and the strategy of utilizing Hu. Chapter 173. And just one day later, another order from the sage emperor was sent to the border in the form of a follow-up. In order to balance the conflict between the Hu and Han generals, as long as 50% of the soldiers in the border troops are Han, 20% of the generals must be Han. This decree was spread across the borders by the Holy Emperor. Fomenlinta, Gao Xianji, Geshu Han, and Sishun. All of the Hu generals in the empire had a copy of this decree placed on their desks. However, this decree didn't cause too much of a commotion by the borders. For over 50% of the soldiers to be Han, 20% of the generals must be Han. This rule wasn't too excessive. In the past, it was a little too extreme to have all of the generals be Hu. It was just that the Holy Emperor didn't ask about this matter, so everyone went along with it. But now that the Holy Emperor had issued the decree, they had no choice but to obey it. Even Fomenlinta and Gao Xianji could only bow their heads in gratitude. Even though it's not satisfactory, it's still a success. Wang Chong received the news in the imperial prison. The regional commander's system wasn't abolished, and it was still being implemented. This left Wang Chong a little disappointed. He had already done his best. The old master, the petition to the Holy Emperor. He had done everything he could, and he even had the support of so many Han generals. But the wheels of history continued to roll on, and it wasn't something that could be stopped. Even so, his efforts weren't in vain. At the very least, he had gotten rid of the utilizing the Hu strategy. In other words, while the Hu generals could take on the role of regional commanders, so could the Han generals. This also reduced the threat of the Hu wreaking havoc in the world in the future. On top of that, as long as 50% of the soldiers in the border troops were Han, 20% of the generals must be Han. This was also a huge improvement. At the very least, there was still room for improvement for the Han soldiers. As for the 3 months of imprisonment, Wang Chong didn't mind it at all. It didn't matter where he stayed. In the imperial prison, he could practice the little yin-yang art in peace. In terms of time, it was just enough for him to master it. Voila! As the chain shook, Wang Chong quickly calmed down and focused on cultivating. Waves of red light circulated within his body. I didn't expect him to survive even like this. Within the Yuzhen Palace, Yang Zhao held the Holy Emperor's verdict and muttered to himself in shock. Many people were watching this verdict, and Yuzhen Palace was one of them. This was because the outcome of this matter would determine the attitude of Yuzhen Palace and other powers toward the Wang clan and Wang Chong in the future. It would determine whether they would get close to them or distance themselves from them, whether they would support them or oppose them. In this incident, countless Hu generals had stepped forward to demand Wang Chong's death. Fomenlinta, Gao Xianji, Geshu Han. Just hearing the names of these Hu generals made Yang Zhao's scalp tingle in fear. Under such immense pressure, he thought that Wang Chong would be doomed. At the very least, he would be severely punished. Who could have thought that it would only be 3 months of confinement? Big brother, do you know of the Jinyuan note system? In the tent, Consort Taijin suddenly spoke. The Jinyuan notes had played a crucial role in Wang Chong's trial. Little sister, you've asked the right person. Even though those people in the royal court are all muddle-headed and think that the Holy Emperor is helping Wang Chong, I can tell you that it's not the Holy Emperor who is helping Wang Chong. They are still underestimating the usefulness of the Jinyuan notes. If this system were to be implemented, it would be a huge credit to the royal court. Even if we were to be treated as nobles, generals, or ministers, it would still be within our rights. Yang Zhao said indifferently with a rather arrogant expression. Even though he spent his days wandering around the gambling dens, Yang Zhao was skilled in calculation and had a natural talent for things related to money. Many people were still confused about Wang Chong's Jinyuan note system, and not many people were discussing it. However, Yang Zhao could sense the importance of it at first glance. Big brother, aren't you exaggerating a little? Is the Jinyuan note really that formidable? In the tent, Consort Taijin was astonished. She had only asked casually, but she didn't expect her big brother, Yang Zhao, to have such a high evaluation of it. Little sister, you don't have to worry about basic necessities at the moment, so you don't know. Do you know how much gold the Tang dynasty mined in a single year? Yang Zhao chuckled. Before Consort Taijin could reply, he revealed the answer himself. 200,000 taels. It sounds like a lot, but let me tell you, 2 years ago, it was 300,000 taels, and before that, it was 500,000 taels. There's a limit to the amount of gold, and as gold is mined, the amount will decrease. There's still 200,000 taels this year, but next year, there might only be 100,000 taels. By the year after that, there might only be 80,000 taels, 70,000 taels, or even 50,000 taels. Do you know what this means? The Tang dynasty, the vast central plains, is only able to mine several 100,000 taels in a single year. Do you know what this means? The empire is running out of money. How is that possible? Consort Taizhen exclaimed in astonishment. She finally understood the severity of the matter. If the empire was running out of money, it would be a huge problem. Little sister, you don't have to be surprised. Every single dynasty has faced such a problem before. It's just that the severity of the problem varies. In fact, given the wealth of the current dynasty, it's already bizarre that they are able to survive until now without any problems. Yang Zhao chuckled. Ever since he entered the royal palace, he hadn't been slacking off either. Through the reputation of Consort Taizhen, he had come into contact with a huge amount of information and learned many things. Of course, those were only related to money. The expenses of the royal court are simply too great. The expenses of the royal court, the local governments, the military, the salaries of the officials. Which of these matters are lacking? Even if there's a mountain of gold and silver, it's still insufficient for them to spend. Without a large amount of gold and silver flowing into the populace, the royal court won't be able to collect much money. However, things will be different with the Jinyuan notes. At this point, Yang Zhao smiled gleefully. With a single sentence, he pointed out the essence of the Jinyuan notes. With the Jinyuan notes, the royal court will be able to mint money freely, and they won't be restricted by the mining of gold and silver anymore. This is a true mountain of gold and silver, inexhaustible and inexhaustible. This Wang Chong is a true genius. Yang Zhao's final words came from the bottom of his heart. This was what a true genius was like. Putting aside the Wuzi steel sword and the memorial to the Holy Emperor, Yang Zhao didn't know much about it, so he didn't have much to say about it. However, this Jinyuan note was a true genius. He really couldn't imagine how Wang Chong could think of such a plan. Compared to Wang Chong's plan, all of the finance ministers in history, be it Guanzi or Tao Zhugong, paled in comparison. It was rare for Yang Zhao to be convinced by someone, especially when it came to matters related to money. But this time, Yang Zhao was truly convinced. In the tent, Consort Taizhen didn't say a word, but she was deep in thought cheers. In the Wang family residence, Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen, big aunt Wang Ru Shuang, Uncle Li Lin, little uncle Wang Mi, mother Madam Wang, little sister, cousin Wang Zhu Yen, and cousin Wang Liang were all gathered in the main hall. Their faces were flushed with excitement, and a joyous mood could be seen. After the verdict of Wang Chong was announced, the happiest ones were none other than the Wang clan. Even though the Wang clan had its own internal conflicts in the past, this time, everyone was truly working together to celebrate this news. Even though they didn't realize it, due to their relationship with Wang Chong, the entire Wang clan had unknowingly formed a united front. Not even they had realized that because of their relationship with Wang Chong, the entire Wang clan had unwittingly coalesced into an iron plate. Even the usually strict big uncle had a smile on his face when he appeared in the Wang family residence. He even took the initiative to pour a few cups of pomegranate juice from the western regions for his little sister. Such a situation was unimaginable in the past. Thank you, everyone, thank you. Madame Wang raised her cup with tea in place of wine. Her eyes reddened, and as she spoke, she nearly burst into tears. She had been worried sick over the past few days. Sister-in-law, don't cry. Everything is over now, everything is fine. Wang Chong's aunt, Wang Rushuang, consoled her softly. Madame Wang nodded her head and wiped away her tears. On the other hand, the Wang family's little sister was quick-witted. She raised her large glass cup high and said, "Come. Here's to young brother coming out soon." His words made everyone laugh. One by one they stood up. "Come, cheers." The imperial prison was isolated from the world. Wang Chong was oblivious to the happenings outside. He cultivated quietly by himself. Lad, who in the world are you? Just as Wang Chong was cultivating, a bright voice suddenly sounded in his head. At the same time, the Stone of Destiny, which had been silent for a long time in Wang Chong's head, spoke the voice that Wang Chong was familiar with. Destiny change. Mysterious prisoner of the underground prison mission reward. 100 destiny energy. Hearing this voice, Wang Chong was taken aback. Who is it? Wang Chong abruptly opened his eyes and scanned the surroundings. But the surroundings were silent. Other than him, no one else seemed to have heard the voice. A few of them even glanced at Wang Chong curiously. I'm asking you a question. How did you get in here? That voice sounded somewhat displeased. It sounded extremely arrogant and conceited. Wang Chong was taken aback. Even as courageous as he was, he didn't expect to meet with such a situation in the imperial prison. There's a reason for me to be locked up in the imperial prison. I wrote a memorial and offended the Holy Emperor, so I was locked up here. May I know why Elder is locked up in the imperial prison? Wang Chong said. The other party's voice sounded directly in his head. This was undoubtedly an extremely profound mental technique. And almost everyone in the imperial prison was a prisoner. Without a doubt, the other party was also a prisoner here. Imperial prison? Haha, you think that this is the imperial prison? Chapter 174. Isn't this the imperial prison? Wang Chong was even more surprised than the other party. He had been here for so long, but this was the first time he heard someone say that this wasn't the imperial prison. The palace of the previous dynasty's great sway is actually called the imperial prison. How ironic. However, it's not wrong to call it the imperial prison. The imperial prison has a total of 9 floors. This is the 10th floor, so let's call it the imperial prison. The man sneered. The great sway's palace? Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. He raised his head and looked around in disbelief. He had been here for so long, but he never knew that this was the great sway's palace. The Tang dynasty replaced the previous Sui dynasty, and the Tang dynasty's palace was built on the ruins of the great Sui's palace. Wang Chong knew all of this. However, Wang Chong didn't know that there was a complete great Sui's palace under the palace. Senior, it's not that I don't believe you. It's just that if this isn't the imperial prison, why are these people locked up here? I can't sense whether this is the imperial prison, but can't they sense it? Wang Chong still had some doubts in his heart. Them? Are you talking about these prisoners who were sent here 10 days ago? These prisoners, as long as they're thrown into a cell, how can they tell whether this is the imperial prison or not? I was wondering why there was no one else on the 9th floor apart from me. Why are there suddenly so many people here? Now I understand. It's all because of you. These prisoners were transferred here because of you. That person's reply left Wang Chong flabbergasted. Wang Chong had always thought that these people had been here for a long time. And it had always been so. But from what the man said, these people were only transferred here temporarily. This was hard for Wang Chong to accept. But Wang Chong believed that the other party had no reason to lie to him about this. How is this possible? Wang Chong raised his head and muttered to himself. The truth that had suddenly emerged made Wang Chong feel an indescribable and huge drop in his heart. According to that person, the surrounding prisoners were actually transferred here at the last minute. Moreover, it seemed like they were transferred here because of him to form this temporary prison. This statement left Wang Chong dumbfounded. But this was not the only thing that left Wang Chong stunned. He had been here for many days now, and he had never seen anything like this before. It was only today that he found out that there were people imprisoned below him. More importantly, the last time he changed the fate of his family and unlocked the title of Destiny Struggler, he was only rewarded with 50 Destiny energy. And this person's mere voice had actually alarmed the Stone of Destiny, causing it to give a reminder of the reward of 100 Destiny energy. Wang Chong found it hard to imagine what kind of person could be so important. Let me ask you, how long have you known him? With this thought in mind, Wang Chong raised his head and pointed at another prisoner. I don't know him. I was only transferred here 10 days ago, no, 1 month, no, 3 months, how long is it, how long has it been? The prisoner who was questioned was still very normal at first, but as time went on his answers became more and more chaotic, until he seemed to be in a psychotic state. Seeing this, Wang Chong quickly stopped. The other prisoners looked as if they were not surprised at all. In the prison, it was so dark that it was impossible to sense the passage of time. Staying here for too long, it was very easy for one to go insane. This kind of thing could not be felt normally. But once there was a trigger, it would immediately act up. Wang Chong could only judge how much time had passed by observing the number of water droplets. Looks like he's right, Wang Chong thought to himself. Even though the other party's answers were all over the place, there was one thing he was sure of, and that was that these people had only been transferred here for a short period of time. However, because they had been locked up in the prison for a long time, they had long become numb, which was why they were oblivious to the changes in their surroundings. Senior, you just said that there are 9 levels in the prison, and I'm locked in the 10th. May I know which level you're on? Wang Chong asked tentatively. This person was too strange and mysterious. Me? If you're on the 10th level, then I'm on the 20th. The lowest level of the Great Sway Palace is me. The man laughed, but Wang Chong could hear a hint of sorrow and anger in his voice. Then why did you come here, senior? Wang Chong asked. The laughter stopped abruptly. In an instant, the entire underground was silent. Wang Chong waited for a long time, but there was no reply. It was as if everything was just an illusion to Wang Chong. Senior? Wang Chong frowned and asked tentatively. Young man, don't ask too many questions. Sometimes, knowing too much isn't necessarily a good thing. Aren't you going out soon? You can ask me again the next time you come here. I've never liked to take advantage of others, especially those of the younger generation. Just take this as the price for talking to you. Before Wang Chong could react, he felt the ground beneath him tremble. Then, a powerful force tore through the air. This energy pierced through the earth and slammed into Wang Chong's body like a thunderbolt. Wang Chong's little yin-yang art had originally encountered a bottleneck, and there was an acupoint that he couldn't open. However, under the effect of this force, it instantly opened up. Not only that, this powerful force didn't stop there. After opening that acupoint, boom boom boom, it helped Wang Chong open up the entire circulation of the little yin-yang art in his body. Then, it circulated once before disappearing without a trace. At the same time, the underground returned to its deathly stillness. That mysterious aura completely disappeared from Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong sat there in a daze, his mind blank. He couldn't help but be stunned by the other party's power. This person had been locked up in the dungeon, but he still possessed such immense power. His yuan qi could pierce through the layers of the earth's crust and accurately strike his body. What shocked Wang Chong even more was that the little yin-yang art was derived from the great yin-yang heaven creation art, and had been passed down to him by the evil emperor. There were definitely not many people who knew about this secret art. Wang Chong didn't know if the other party had known about this secret art beforehand, or if the other party had observed him while he was cultivating the little yin-yang art in the dungeon and deduced the complete little yin-yang art. But no matter which one it was, they were both astonishing to Wang Chong. Senior? 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 Wang Chong tried calling out 3 times, but the ground was completely silent. There was no response at all. It was so quiet that it was as if nothing had happened. However, the surging yuan qi in his body clearly told Wang Chong that this wasn't an illusion. Who is this person? He's so powerful, but he's been locked up in the dungeon. And from the looks of it, he's been locked up for a very, very long time. Wang Chong couldn't help but think. Wang Chong had seen many things in his previous life, and he knew many experts. The evil emperor, So Yong-sun, Wang Chong knew all of them. But Wang Chong didn't know that there was such an expert locked up in the depths of the dungeon. And of all the experts he knew, there wasn't a single one who could match up to this person. Who is this person? Wang Chong mumbled to himself. This was the first time he felt something unexpected, and he was deeply curious about it. But no matter how confused Wang Chong was, no matter how curious he was, the mysterious existence beneath the ground had truly vanished. No matter how Wang Chong called out, There was no response. It was as if the existence had never existed in the first place. After trying a few times, Wang Chong could only give up. The little yin-yang art was cleared in one go, saving Wang Chong a lot of time and effort. Thus, Wang Chong decided to focus on consolidating his cultivation technique. Time flew by, and 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. Before he knew it, it was finally time for Wang Chong to leave the dungeon. Congratulations, user, for altering the consort Taijin incident and altering the fate of the King of Song. Mission completion rate, 30%. Reward, 20 destiny energy. Congratulations, user, for altering the regional commander's incident and altering the fate of the empire. Mission completion rate, 30%. Reward, 30 destiny energy. Almost at the same time that the last day arrived, the Stone of Destiny's familiar voice sounded in his ears. At the same time, 2 messages appeared in Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong was stunned, and then his heart was filled with joy. 50 destiny energy. I actually obtained 50 destiny energy. Wang Chong was both surprised and excited. This harvest was simply too bountiful. It had far exceeded Wang Chong's expectations. Previously, Wang Chong had altered the fate of his entire clan, and indirectly he had also altered the fate of the King of Song. Adding on the special title that came with activating the Destiny Struggler title, he had only obtained 50 destiny energy in total after doing so many things. But this time, he had only completed 30% of the mission, and he had already obtained 50 destiny energy. If he completed everything at 100%, wouldn't he be able to obtain more than 150 destiny energy? This made Wang Chong even more certain of his judgment. It seems that changing the fate of the empire is far more rewarding than changing one's own fate. Wang Chong thought to himself. The only regret was that in the Consort Taijin incident, Consort Taijin still walked together with the Holy Emperor. This was a historical event that had not changed. And in the end, the regional commander's incident was still carried out. Wang Chong had only removed than utilizing the Hoot strategy. Otherwise, the reward he would have received would have been even greater. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Wang Chong saw several prison guards, led by Zhou Xing, walking toward him. Opening the cell door, before Wang Chong could say anything, one of the prison guards walked up to Wang Chong and pressed on the back of his head. Here you go again. Chapter 175. Wang Chong was jolted awake by a tsunami of cheers. As he slowly regained consciousness, there were only a few figures before him. The cheers came from the distant palace walls. Standing before him was the warden of the imperial prison, Zhou Xing, and a few other prison guards. They were bowing respectfully as they stood before him. One of the prison guards seemed especially nervous. With a single glance, Wang Chong recognized that it was this prison guard who had knocked him out. Wang Gongzi, pardon my offense. I have no choice but to comply with the decree of the emperor. I hope that Gongzi can forgive me. Zhou Xing bowed, his posture extremely humble, and his tone was extremely courteous. Ever since the eunuch from the Sky Palace came, Zhou Xing knew that the young man before him wasn't in existence that he could afford to offend. Lord Zhou, you're being too polite. Wang Chong chuckled and didn't argue with him. Right, can I leave now? Of course you can. Zhou Xing hurriedly stepped to the side, opening up a path for Wang Chong. At this moment he couldn't wait for Wang Chong to leave. Even though the imperial prison dared to lock up anyone, this person definitely didn't belong here. Wang Chong chuckled. With a flick of his sleeves, he passed through the crowd and continued on his way. Not too far away, a carriage was already prepared. This was Zhou Xing's arrangement. Wang Chong dived into the carriage, and it rumbled forward. As he passed through the palace alleys, Wang Chong could sense that many people were observing him, both in the light and in the shadows. The regional commander's incident didn't just attract the attention of the officials in the royal court. Even the imperial army was within their sights as well. Not to mention, Wang Chong was the creator of the Wuzi steel. The closer he got to the palace gates, the louder the cheers Wang Chong heard became. Wave after wave of cheers reverberated through the air. Finally, the carriage arrived at the palace gates and stopped. Wang Chong. Chong. As soon as Wang Chong got out of the car, he heard a burst of joyful cheers. Turning his head, Wang Chong saw two familiar figures striding toward him from more than 50 meters away from the palace gate. Commander Zhao. Uncle. Wang Chong's eyes lit up as he immediately recognized it. Needless to say, Zhao Fengchen was an old acquaintance of his from the Blue Bottle Pavilion. As for his uncle, Wang Chong, he wasn't surprised at all. Uncle and Zhao Fengchen were both members of the Imperial Army, and the Imperial Guards of the Royal Palace weren't allowed to enter or stay for long. However, Uncle, Zhao Fengchen, and the others were different. The forbidden area of the Imperial Palace was their territory to begin with. "Ah, boy, you finally came out. Chong, oh, we've waited for a long time." The two of them strode forward and hugged Wang Chong tightly. "Hey, let go. You two are too strong. I'm going to be strangled to death." "Ha, this little bit of strength is nothing. I haven't even used my full strength." The two of them laughed heartily. Even though Wang Chong's neck was red from being strangled, he felt warmth in his heart. This was the feeling of kinship. It had been 3 months, and he was finally released from the Imperial prison. "Hee, I wanted to invite you to the Imperial Army for a chat. However, it seems like that won't be possible. There are still people waiting for you outside. Hurry up and go out. Zhu Yan, your big uncle, and the others are waiting outside." The two of them didn't take up too much of Wang Chong's time. They patted his shoulders and led him out of the palace gate. No one else was allowed to enter. After passing through the heavy palace gate, a ray of sunlight shone in from the outside. At the moment when Wang Chong appeared outside the palace gate, boom! An earth-shattering cheer suddenly sounded. This cheer was several times louder than what Wang Chong had heard in the royal palace. "Wang Chong! Chong Gongzi is out. Chong, look! It's Wang Gongzi." Outside the royal palace, the crowd was in jubilation. Walking out of the palace gate, Wang Chong was still a little unaccustomed to the dazzling sunlight. By the time he got used to it and slowly opened his eyes, Wang Chong was dumbfounded by the sight of the sea of people before him. He didn't realize it when he was in the royal palace, but now that he was out, Wang Chong realized how many people had gathered outside. Looking out from the palace gate and into the distance, the crowd was densely packed. As far as the eye could see, there were people everywhere. Even the houses and trees on the sides of the street were packed with people, all of them looking in his direction with jubilation in their eyes. At a glance, it was hard to tell how many tens of thousands of people there were. "Wang Chong! Wang Chong! Wang Chong! Wang Chong!" In just a few seconds, the cheers of Wang Chong resounded from all directions. When tens of thousands of people wholeheartedly supported a person and shouted his name, it was an extremely majestic sight. Wang Chong stood at the palace gate in a daze, his entire body frozen. He had heard the cheers outside the royal palace, but he had no idea that so many people would come to welcome him on the day of his release. Those smiles were sincere and joyful, without any impurities. There were nobles, commoners, wealthy merchants, impoverished clans, and even a few profligate scions. At this moment, everyone was cheering for him from the bottom of their hearts. Many of these people had probably never seen or heard of him before. But on the day of his release, they had all gathered together to celebrate and cheer for him. This was the first time in his life that Wang Chong had received the cheers and support of so many people. Standing under the sunlight, Wang Chong felt a warmth in his heart. This was the Central Plains. This was the empire of the Tang dynasty. As long as one did the right thing, the people would support one. Whether it was a wealthy merchant or impoverished clans, the scions of nobility or the commoners, even the profligate scions, they would all wholeheartedly support one. Everyone had a scale in their hearts, and even the profligate scions would be able to distinguish right from wrong. Although he had been sentenced to 3 months of imprisonment and had spent 3 months in the imperial prison, at this moment, Wang Chong felt that it was all worth it. Enjoy all of this. Today, almost everyone in the capital, be it the nobles, the ministers, or the generals of the army, had come. This is a festival that belongs to you. Chong, a big uncle is happy for you. A familiar voice sounded in his ear. Dressed in court robes, big uncle Wang Zhen strode over and patted Wang Chong's shoulder, his heart brimming with pride. Although Wang Chong was not his son, at this moment he felt a deep sense of pride for the Wang clan to have such a descendant. Big uncle? A glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. Big uncle wasn't the only one who had come to welcome him. Through the crowd, Wang Chong saw little uncle Wang Mi, big aunt Wang Rushuang, cousin Wang Liang, and even cousin Wang Li. Even though Wang Li's face was still cold, the expression in his eyes spoke volumes. Other than the kin of the Wang clan, Wang Chong also saw many familiar faces amidst the welcoming crowd. Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, Elder Zhao, Elder Sun, Elder Ma. All of grandfather's old subordinates had gathered here, and they were excitedly cheering and applauding for him. Other than them, Wang Chong also saw many other officials. Most of them were strangers to Wang Chong. Yet all of them were smiling at him. Suddenly, a firework burst into the sky amidst the crowd. Following which, countless fireworks burst into the sky. It wasn't just in the vicinity of the royal palace. In the entire capital, regardless of whether they knew each other or not, everyone chose to set off fireworks and firecrackers on this day to celebrate for Wang Chong. The entire capital was in a festive mood. Wang Chong didn't stay for too long. Under his big uncle's lead, after greeting the officials in the royal court, he immediately dived into a carriage that had been prepared beforehand. A moment ago, Wang Chong was still immersed in the joy of being able to see the light of day once more. But in the next instant, a fair calf appeared before Wang Chong's eyes, and with a loud pa, Wang Chong was knocked to the ground by a tremendous force. He was pinned firmly onto the carpet of the carriage, unable to move at all. Second sister. Wang Chong's face paled in fright. Even though it was just a fleeting glance, Wang Chong could clearly see that the figure dressed in red with a stern expression leaning against the wall of the carriage was none other than his cousin, Wang Zhuyan. It was no wonder he didn't see her amidst the crowd. She had been hiding here all along. A moment ago he was still enjoying the admiration of the crowd, and in the next instant he was smashed to the ground. This surprise came a little too quickly. Brat, if you dare to write such a careless memorial again, don't blame second sister for getting nasty. Before Wang Chong could say anything, a familiar voice sounded from above him. Wang Chong's body was initially stiff and he was prepared to struggle, but upon hearing those words, his heart warmed and his body softened. Second sister, I know my mistake. I won't be so careless next time. Wang Chong said softly. Remember your words. Cousin Wang Zhuyan's voice was still cold, but she loosened her grip and retracted her leg. Then, she sat by the side and turned her head away. For some reason, Wang Chong felt that his cousin's eyes were moist, as though she had been crying. I'm sorry, second sister. Wang Chong sat up and apologized seriously. Although they weren't biological siblings, and although she sometimes treated him violently and was unreasonable, his second sister treated him so well that nothing could be said about it. There were many times when Wang Chong felt that his cousin was his blood-related second sister. If not for the fact that she was concerned about him and loved him, she might not have gotten so angry. Do you know how big of a trouble you have caused this time? This isn't a small matter. Do you know how worried little uncle, my father, your mother, and all of us are? Cousin Wang Zhuyan's face was still cold, but her expression was much better than before. This regional commander's incident was a huge blow and test to the entire Wang clan. Even though the outcome was positive and Wang Chong was released, only those who were personally involved in the matter knew how dangerous it was. For so many of the Hu generals by the borders to demand for Wang Chong's death, including many of the generals by the borders and the protector general of the empire, this was something unimaginable to many people. Wang Zhuyan almost thought that Wang Chong was really going to die. Wang Chong had gotten into trouble before, but it wasn't as big as this one. How could Wang Zhuyan not be worried and angry? Hee, second sister, aren't I fine now? Right, second sister, I have a small present for you this time. Wang Chong suddenly took out an object and said with a fawning smile. Don't give me that. I'm trying to divert my attention again. And what's this? It looks so ugly. Hee, this is called a hair clip. I made it from a piece of metal. It can be used to fix your hair. If your hair clip is ugly, I can redesign it and add a butterfly on it. That way it will definitely look better, Wang Chong said with a smile. Wang Chong's hair clip was actually just a thick piece of metal wire made into a new shape. This was the simplest hair clip. Of course, on the basis of this U-shape hair clip, it was possible to create all kinds of beautiful hair clips. This was just the beginning. Wang Chong wasn't too interested in such a thing, and he didn't expect to make a fortune from it. However, it should be sufficient for him to please his cousin and her close friends. As expected, after his cousin tried out the hair clip made by Wang Chong, and upon realizing that it was effective, her interest was piqued. Thus, she didn't bring up the matter of Wang Chong's imprisonment anymore. She only said that Wang Chong's item this time was too ugly, and she forced Wang Chong to make a few prettier ones. Chapter 176. After escaping from cousin's claws, the carriage continued on its way, and amidst the cheers of the crowd, it departed from the palace gates, heading in the direction of the Wang family residence. At this time, the person Wang Chong wanted to see the most was his mother. This time, when he wrote a memorial to the Holy Emperor, he acted on his own and did not report to his mother. In the end, he caused such a big mess, and he did not know how his mother would be worried. For the past 3 months, he had been confined, and his mother was probably suffering as well. When he was released from prison this time, he didn't see his mother among the welcoming crowd. However, Wang Chong knew that it wasn't because his mother didn't love him or care about him. It was because his mother's identity wasn't suitable for her to be there. "Little brother, you're back?" Just as Wang Chong got off the carriage, a girl's eyes lit up at the entrance. Then she ran over and threw herself into Wang Chong's embrace like a young bird returning to the forest. The immense force caused Wang Chong to stagger. He could not withstand it even with his essence chi. "Little sister, your strength has increased again." Wang Chong hugged his little sister and smiled bitterly. During this period of time, he did not slack off. Whenever he had time, he would cultivate. His skills improved by leaps and bounds. However, it seemed like his little sister wasn't idle either. Other people trained to gain strength, but his little sister ate to gain strength. Only his little sister, who was born with divine strength, could force him to such a state with just physical strength. "Little brother, don't make fun of me. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." The Wang family's little sister raised her head abruptly and glared at Wang Chong. Her small eyes were filled with killing intent. Wang Chong burst into laughter. How would he dare to say anything else? Although his little sister was innocent, she was quite fierce when she was angry. With his strength, he might not be able to defeat her. After greeting his little sister, Wang Chong went to visit his mother. Then he met Shanhai, Menglong, Arloja, Ablanadin, Tuoba Gyuan, Li Zhuxin, and Mayase Mayaka. "Young master, welcome back." This was Mayase Mayaka. "Hee, I almost thought you wouldn't come back." This was Li Zhuxin. Naturally, Wang Chong smiled at Mayase Mayaka. As for Li Zhuxin, Wang Chong could only roll his eyes. "Mr. Li, aren't you afraid that no one will pay you next month?" That's true. There aren't many employers as generous as you, young master." Li Zhuxin replied with a smile. Although they talked back and forth, Wang Chong could clearly feel that everyone's impression of him was obviously different now that he was back. However, they were still as close as before. In addition, when Wang Chong came back this time, he found that he had received a lot of letters. All of them were sent to him by Han generals from all over the country. Everyone knew that Wang Chong would be released from prison 3 months ago. Thus, other than congratulating Wang Chong on his release, they sent the letters over to Wang Chong to invite Wang Chong to join their armies. Even though they didn't dare to claim a high position and generous salary, given their authority over the military, it wouldn't be a problem for them to confer a captain or even a commandant. Just based on this, Wang Chong was already standing at a higher starting point than most of them. "Gongzi, which of these invitations do you want?" A voice sounded from behind. Shanhai and Menglong looked at the mountain of invitations in Wang Chong's study, and their eyes were filled with envy. The two of them came from the military, and they knew how envious Wang Chong's fortuitous encounter was. That was a captain and a commandant they were talking about. Even in their entire lives in the military, they had never reached such heights before. To think that their young master would be able to achieve such a position as soon as he entered the military. To most people, this was something that they would never be able to achieve in their entire lives. But to Wang Chong, all he had to do was nod his head. If it was someone else, it might cause a huge controversy. However, if it was his young master, he believed that from the top to the bottom, from the officials of the imperial court to the generals and even the soldiers, no one would say anything. Even the Holy Emperor would be happy to see it happen. Otherwise, he wouldn't have withstood the pressure from the Hu generals to protect Wang Chong. Even though it looks tempting, you are thinking too much. I won't choose any of these invitations. Wang Chong looked at them for a moment before placing the invitations back on the table. The two of them were dumbfounded. Gongzi, this is a captain and commandant. If you can become a captain and commandant the moment you enter the military, Gongzi can save many years of hard work. Shenhai and Meng Long were astonished. Let me ask you. Given my current strength, do you think that I am qualified to become a commandant? The military is a place where strength is important. Even if I were to enter, I wouldn't be able to follow orders. At this moment, Wang Chong had calmed down. Even though the prospects were wonderful, Wang Chong knew what he wanted and what he didn't. Furthermore, the training camp is about to open. I can't join the military. Too many things could happen in 3 months. Not only was the matter of the 3 great training camps settled, even the large-scale construction work had been completed. On the other hand, all of the instructors, personnel, and equipment had been assigned to the camps. This was what Uncle Li Lin had told him. Due to the tight schedule, he only had 2 to 3 days left. 3 months of imprisonment. Wang Chong thought that he would miss out on the most important event in the history of the Great Tang Empire. But from the looks of it, the Holy Emperor had already given him sufficient time. But even if I were to graduate from the training camps, I won't be able to become a commandant. Meng Long was perplexed. Meng Long, you still don't understand? You'll understand in the future. The 3 great training camps are an unprecedented undertaking of the Tang dynasty. Being able to join them is definitely better than just trying to get an official position. Wang Chong said with a smile, not going overboard. But even if that's the case, Gongzi can still wait until you graduate from the training camps before joining one of the generals. Shenhai said. Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan, was a general of the Tang dynasty, but among these letters, there were quite a few who were even more influential than Wang Chong's father. This time, Wang Chong didn't say anything, only shaking his head. He had his own considerations, and he wasn't the kind of person who could accept restrictions. The crisis that the Tang dynasty would face in the future also determined that he wouldn't be able to follow the rules like others, working hard to advance step by step in order to obtain an official position under a general. Wang Chong's ambitions didn't lie in this. Becoming a high official was just a means for him to achieve his dreams, but it wasn't his true goal. Leaving the study, Wang Chong welcomed his first batch of guests. Paying respects to Gongzi. 8 burly men, the instructors of the Imperial Army, stood in a row before Wang Chong. These Imperial Army instructors looked to be in their 40s or 50s. Every single one of them had a dignified bearing, and they exuded a sharp and capable aura. Such a person would definitely be looked up to by everyone in the Imperial Palace. But before Wang Chong, the 8 Imperial Army instructors lowered their heads and straightened their backs. We were all recommended by Lord Wang Mi. The instructors of the Imperial Army have strict rules. Even after retiring from the army, they aren't allowed to casually teach others. We were worried that Gongzi might have some ulterior motives, but from the looks of it now, we were overthinking it. Just based on Gongzi's actions, no matter what Gongzi wants to do, we are willing to lend our meager strength to you. It's too polite to talk about money. Just based on Gongzi's reputation, we are willing to serve Gongzi for free. The 8 of us are only the first batch. We are helping Gongzi get in touch with 8 other experienced instructors. We are willing to serve Gongzi for free. They will be going around tomorrow. That the 8 of them spoke respectfully to Wang Chong, as though he was their most respected person. Great. Wang Chong was taken aback for a moment before he rejoiced. Those experienced Imperial Army instructors were notoriously difficult to invite. and every single one of them had a stubborn personality. Even if one were to offer a high price, they might not be willing. That was also the reason why there hadn't been any movements from Little Uncle's side. Just that, Wang Chong didn't expect that after the regional commander's incident, he would actually manage to convince these stubborn Imperial Army instructors. It would already be a blessing if 2 or 3 Imperial Army instructors agreed to Wang Chong's plan. By then, he could make use of the students taught by these Imperial Army instructors to select the best among them and expand the scope of his plan. Even though it would take a long time, it wasn't a bad idea either. But now, 8 experienced Imperial Army instructors had come, and this was only the first batch. This had far exceeded Wang Chong's expectations. Furthermore, these stubborn Imperial Army instructors were even willing to help him without asking anything in return. This was something that Wang Chong didn't dare to imagine at the start. With these people, he would be able to carry out his plan faster and more comprehensively. To Wang Chong, there was no better news than this. It could be said that this was the best news that he had heard today. "Everyone, I'm honored to receive your help." Wang Chong was overjoyed. However, the matter of the betrothal fee was something that had been discussed from the start. Thus, it would be best to go by the agreement. "I'll pay everyone according to the betrothal fee we agreed on. As for the matter of free, Wang Chong appreciates your kind intentions." Wang Chong said, "Wang Gongzi, we've already discussed beforehand that we're willing to help you for free. It's out of respect for you, as well as your actions, that we agreed to your request. It's not for the betrothal fee. If Gongzi insists on paying us the betrothal fee, are you intending to humiliate us?" One of the instructors of the Imperial Army, who looked like a bear, said with a solemn expression. This, Wang Chong was stunned. Chapter 177. Everyone, the reason why Wang Chong is doing this is because he hopes to recruit more Imperial Army instructors to help me. If they were to know that I don't pay any engagement fees, wouldn't it mean that no one would come to me in the future? Why don't we do this instead? If you find it hard to accept, I'll just change it to half of the original amount." Wang Chong suddenly said with a smile. "All right then." The 8 Imperial Army instructors glanced at one another. Thinking that Wang Chong's words made sense, they reluctantly nodded their heads. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong finally smiled. What came next was the details of the matter. It was already certain that Wang Chong's training camp would be built on top of the spirit vein. With his teacher, the evil emperor, presiding over it, and these powerful Imperial Army instructors, it was an impregnable fortress. Ordinary powers wouldn't be able to lay their eyes on Wang Chong's spirit vein. As for the construction of the training camp, Wang Chong had already started investing money into it a long time ago. Even though it wasn't guaranteed to happen so quickly, Wang Chong believed that it would take shape within 3 months. Great! To think that Gongzi would have a spirit vein. It's no wonder why Gongzi wanted to recruit so many Imperial Army instructors. "Gongzi, don't worry, we'll set off in the next few days and do as Gongzi says." The 8 muscular and burly instructors of the Imperial Army were overjoyed. Even though the Wang clan was famous, they didn't have a deep foundation. In the first place, they were impressed by Wang Chong's character, so they volunteered to help him. Just that, they didn't expect Wang Chong to be so well prepared. Spirit veins weren't something that just any power could possess. The Imperial Army instructors were swift and decisive, and their promises were worth their weight in gold. After agreeing to Wang Chong's request, a Wang clan guard led the way to the spirit vein in the middle of the mountain range according to the map Wang Chong had given him. Wang Gongzi, it has been a long time. Not long after the 8 Imperial Army instructors left, another wave of students arrived. A middle-aged man wearing a white robe that dragged on the ground, with an outstanding demeanor and a simple hairstyle, slowly walked in from the outside. Wang Chong's memorial to the throne had stirred up the court and the world. Now that he had been released after 3 months, it was unknown how many people's attention he had attracted. It was destined that Wang Chong would not be able to relax easily. "You are?" Wang Chong frowned and looked in surprise at the strange man who had just walked in. Wang Chong believed that the guards at the entrance wouldn't allow a random person to barge in. However, Wang Chong did not look familiar. "Ah, Wang Gongzi, We just met a few months ago. At that time, young master even gave me 1,000 taels of gold. Could it be that young master has forgotten? The newcomer laughed out loud. 1,000 gold taels? Wang Chong was even more confused. Although he was now truly wealthy, 1,000 taels of gold was not a small amount. If he had given it to someone before, it would have been impossible for it not to have happened. How is this possible? What is the background of this person? Wang Chong narrowed his eyes as a thought flashed through his mind. Wang Chong knew that he had not reached the level of forgetfulness. If it was someone whom he had met before, he would surely be able to remember them. However, this person before him, Wang Chong had no impression of him at all. Young master sure is forgetful. Do you still remember the person you helped near the Blue Bottle Pavilion? The smile on the newcomer's face finally retracted as he spoke. Boom! As though a bolt of lightning flashing across his mind, Wang Chong widened his eyes in disbelief. It's you. Wang Chong finally knew who the person before him was. However, after knowing the identity of the person before him, Wang Chong felt even more disbelief. Yang Zhao. That person was Yang Zhao, the one whom he met outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion, the disheveled and unkempt man who looked like a hoodlum. The future imperial uncle of the Tang dynasty. The reason why Wang Chong had such a deep impression of him was because he would have an even more shocking name in the future, Yang Guozhong. Yang Zhao was his original name, while Guozhong was the name he would use in the future when his career was at its peak. However, other than Wang Chong, no one else knew of this. This included Yang Zhao himself. It's him. How can a person's disposition change so drastically? Wang Chong was truly shocked. This was the first time he had seen a person's disposition change to such an extent. He had seen Yang Zhao's destitute state before, and he was a complete hooligan. However, the current Yang Zhao was completely different from that of a hooligan. Instead, he looked just like a distinguished scholar. At this moment, Yang Zhao's every single action and demeanor was something that even the officials of the royal court would feel inferior to. He was even more like a physician than a physician. No wonder he could rise to fame in the royal court in the future and stir up a storm. Just based on his temperament and appearance, he is definitely not inferior to those important figures in the imperial court. Wang Chong knew Yang Zhao's background. But at this time, Wang Chong could not help but be deeply impressed. Even he himself could not achieve this kind of appearance. Young master should not know who I am. My surname is Yang, and my name is Zhao. Consort Taijin is my closest cousin. Yang Zhao bowed and announced his name with a proud look on his face. Just this smug look on his face had completely destroyed the image of a distinguished scholar that he had painstakingly built up. In essence, Yang Zhao was still a commoner. So, you are Consort Taijin's cousin? Wang Chong pretended to be surprised, but he was secretly laughing in his heart. From the first time he met Yang Zhao, he had already known about the latter's background. But he could not say it directly in front of Yang Zhao. I am indebted to young master for giving me 1,000 taels of gold last time, but Yang Zhao did not have the chance to thank young master. Yang Zhao has already prepared 1,000 taels of gold outside and placed it in the carriage. In a while, I will have someone send it up and return it to young master. Yang Zhao said with a straight face. It would be weird if I believed you. Wang Chong laughed in his heart. Knowing who the person in front of him was and his style of conduct, it would be weird if Wang Chong believed that there was 1,000 taels of gold in the carriage. In his previous life, Yang Zhao was famous and everyone knew about him. Although he was ignorant and incompetent, as long as it was related to money, he would immediately become extremely shrewd. This could be considered as showing his true colors. He had spent most of his life in the gambling house, and although he did not learn anything else, he was very shrewd in this aspect. It was impossible for such a person to spit out what he had eaten. Lord Yang is too polite. Giving it away is giving it away. That is also a small token of my appreciation. There is no need for Lord Yang to stand on ceremony. Wang Chong said, Since that is the case, then I will not stand on ceremony with young master. Yang Zhao was just being polite, and he knew when to stop. If Wang Chong really wanted to accept it, he really did not have 1,000 taels of gold in the carriage. Oh right, actually this time, I am also here on a mission. This is a letter written by Her Highness. Why don't young master take a look? Wang Chong glanced at Yang Zhao and was greatly surprised. After all this time, it turned out that the person who wanted to see him was Consort Tai Zhen. He took the letter from Yang Zhao's hands and glanced at it. The handwriting on the title page was written in silk, and it had the aura of a scholarly family. It really is Consort Tai Zhen's handwriting. Wang Chong was secretly surprised. Consort Tai Zhen had a habit of hiring others to write for her. Although her handwriting was neat and elegant, it was not her own. In his previous life, there were very few authentic Consort Tai Zhen's handwriting. Who would have thought that he would receive one? Consort Tai Zhen's handwriting was thin, somewhat similar to the thin golden figure in Wang Chong's memory. However, there was a hint of feminine embroidery. Smelling it, there was also a faint fragrance of an orchid and musk, causing one's heart to flutter. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Knowing that he was in danger, he quickly calmed down and opened the letter, reading it carefully. The contents of Consort Tai Zhen's letter were very ordinary. First, she scolded Wang Chong, saying that Wang Chong was extremely daring to impersonate the king of song and write a poem for her. Then, she praised him again. She said that his poem was extremely beautiful and full of spirituality. He praised his poem and asked. The last sentence was, since there is a poem of purity and peace, there is naturally a second. Young master is very talented. I wonder if you can compose one as soon as possible so that I can reward you. There is not only a second poem of purity and peace, there is a third. When Wang Chong saw this, he understood what Yang Zhao was here for. The poem of purity and peace in his memory was indeed very powerful. He was not the only one who suffered from the 3 months of imprisonment. There was also that person in the palace. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sent Yang Zhao to his house in a hurry to ask for a poem on the first day he was released from prison. After all, that person was someone who loved poetry. I don't know anything about poetry. I don't know how to appreciate it either. However, Her Highness did say that your poems are very good. If you have the time, I hope that you can come to Yuzhen Palace more often. Yang Zhao touched his nose and said embarrassedly. What Yang Zhao liked was money, but Consort Tai Zhen sent him to ask for a poem. In this aspect, Yang Zhao really couldn't be said to have any accomplishments, let alone say anything. If Wang Chong invited him to talk about poetry, it would be awkward. It was better to expose his shortcomings to avoid embarrassment. Lord Yang is too humble. Since Her Highness wants to see it, I will do it immediately. Wang Chong didn't expose his shortcomings. There was a ready-made brush, ink, paper, and inkstone in the room. Wang Chong didn't stand on ceremony. After a moment of silence, he began to write the second poem of purity and peace in his memory. Wang Chong didn't give this poem to Consort Tai Zhen. It wasn't because he was deliberately mystifying or trying to show off his talent. It was because this poem was very taboo. In another time and space, the mention of Zhao Fian in the poem of purity and peace almost caused Li Bai's head to roll. It was also because of this reason that Wang Chong didn't write the follow-up. However, 3 months was enough for Wang Chong to think of a countermeasure. With this thought in mind, Wang Chong quickly wrote down the famous song of purity and peace, Ci2. A fragrant red dew. Clouds and rain on Mount Wu's broken intestines. May I ask who is similar in spring and autumn? Poor Shizi, her makeup covered in tears. 4 lines of 28 words were written in the time of a few breaths. Yang Zhao couldn't help but stare at it. Although he was ignorant, he wasn't completely clueless. Every talented person would need to prepare in advance. Although the number of words in a poem was small, it took a long time. An hour was considered short. There were many people who couldn't write a sentence in hours or even days. But Wang Chong wrote in a hurry, not even taking a few breaths. This ability left Yang Zhao dumbfounded. He finally knew how impressive Wang Chong's poetic talent was. The youth in front of him couldn't be understood with common sense. How impressive! Chapter 178. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin Wang Chong ignored Yang Zhao. Looking at the song of purity and peace, he nodded his head in satisfaction. In another time-space, Li Bai was drunk and obeying the emperor's orders. Although he was full of poetry, he was drunk and didn't think it through. In the last 2 lines he wrote, "Who in the Han Palace looks like her? A pitiful swallow leaning on her new makeup." In another time-space, when Wang Chong first saw this line, he thought that Li Bai was praising Yang Taizhen for being more beautiful than Zhao Fian. Later on, he found out that this was not the case. In the poem, pitiful meant cute, while leaning on her new makeup referred to the beauty's delicate expression. Here, Yang Taizhen was compared to the Zhao Fian of the Han dynasty. Who was Zhao Fian? Zhao Fian, who danced on the palm, was referring to her. She was the empress of the Han dynasty. Her figure was graceful and light, able to dance on the palm. Legend has it that when the Han dynasty stretched out his palm, Zhao Fian danced on it. Zhao Fian's beauty was unimaginable. Li Bai comparing Yang Taizhen to Zhao Fian was a compliment. However, he didn't know that other than her graceful figure and being able to dance on the palm, Zhao Fian also had a famous story, swallow pecking the imperial grandson. This story was written by Luo Binwang in Fursu Jingya Quelling Martial Arts and included in Guwen Guanji. Although Zhao Fian had the beauty that captivated even the birds and beasts, the moon that shamed the flowers, and her lithe figure that could dance on the palm, she had a venomous heart and was prone to jealousy. Emperor Cheng of Han was poisoned to death by her, causing the deaths of countless princes and grandsons. Li Bai compared Yang Taizhen to a venomous Zhao Fian who would poison the princes and grandsons in the future. Wasn't he courting death? If it weren't for the fact that he was really well-versed in poetry and had outstanding talent, unparalleled in the palace, he would have been a dead man at that time. The world Wang Chong lived in was different from that time-space. Li Bai was gone and so was Du Fu. But Emperor Cheng of Han and Zhao Fian did. As for the consort Taizhen in the palace, she had done a lot of research on poetry. If he really wrote a song of purity and peace too and cursed her to be the vicious Zhao Fian, wouldn't he offend her to death? There was no need to mention the friendship of the song of purity and peace that he had written before. They were about to become mortal enemies, and they would not rest until one of them was dead. There was no way Wang Chong would dare to give it to her. However, it would not be a problem if he made some slight changes. Shi Zi was also one of the 4 great beauties. The beauty that could captivate even the birds and beasts, and the beauty that outshines the moon and shames the flowers, came from her. It was said that her beauty had reached the pinnacle. When she washed up by the lake, the fish were suffocated by her beauty and forgot to breathe, sinking to the bottom of the water. When flowers saw her, they would automatically close their petals and become dull, not daring to compete with her for beauty. One could only imagine how beautiful Shi Zi was. More importantly, King Wu, whom she served, was also a monarch. As for whether or not there was anything on Shi Zi that could trigger taboos, associations, or hatred, Wang Chong couldn't be bothered to think about it. Li Taibai was still too timid, only daring to compare Yang Taizhen to Zhao Fian. Wang Chong directly asked her to surpass Shi Zi. Even if there were any problems, there would be no more problems. The consort has entered the palace. Wang Chong had nothing to congratulate her for being conferred the title of consort. Let's write another poem to celebrate. Wang Chong suddenly said. Since he had already written the song of purity and peace too, he might as well write the song of purity and peace 3 as well. Good. That would be great. The consort will definitely like it very much. Yang Zhao's eyes lit up and he applauded. This was not flattery. Only those who lived in the palace would know how much the consort loved poetry. The words that Wang Chong wrote previously were so crooked that even the consort kept it close to her body. She did not despise it at all and took it out to read almost every day. If Wang Chong were to take out 2 poems at once, she would be overjoyed. Furthermore, Wang Chong's current poems were not simple. Perhaps even he himself did not know about it. He was already famous for his poems. Just the poem he wrote previously had solidified the consort's title as the #1 beauty in the palace. If he could write a few more of such poems, wouldn't it help the consort stabilize her position? If the consort's position was stable, he would naturally be as stable as Mount Tai. Yang Zhao was aware of the relationship between the two. This is a noble. Yang Zhao watched as Wang Chong picked up the brush with a strange look in his eyes. On the other side, Wang Chong stood behind the desk with a brush in his hand. Without much hesitation, he began to write Song of Purity and Peace 3. Compared to the extremely controversial Song of Purity and Peace 2, which almost brought about the disaster of being beheaded, this poem was much more peaceful. There were not many disputes. However, the 3 poems of purity and peace had a sequence. Before the second poem, Wang Chong did not dare to show off the third poem. Consort Taizhen is now officially conferred the title of consort. Writing this Song of Purity and Peace 3 can be considered appropriate. As Wang Chong thought to himself, he quickly pressed down the paperweight and began to write. Famous flowers toppling a nation in joy. The 7 words were crooked, but between the lines, there was a kind of fresh elegance. A different kind of charm came out of the paper and assaulted one's face. Wang Chong did not delay. After a pause, he continued to write. Looks like the emperor will smile. Explains the infinite hatred of the spring breeze. Agarwood Pavilion leaning against the north railing. After writing the 28 words, Wang Chong heaved a sigh of relief. I heard that the scenery of the Agarwood Pavilion in the palace is very beautiful. When Lord Yang goes back, you might as well tell Consort that if Consort is free, perhaps she can go there to have a look. After saying this, Wang Chong flicked the paper and gave it to Yang Zhao. Thank you. Thank you. Yang Zhao hurriedly took it, carefully folded it and put it in his sleeve. Young Master Yang is very talented. Not only do you do business, but you also write essays. You can also be appointed by Emperor Song and have the protection of hundreds of officials. I hope that we can have more contact in the future. Of course, of course. If Lord Yang wants to come in the future, Wang Chong will welcome you at any time. Wang Chong returned the courtesy. The current Yang Zhao had already embarked on the Guizhong path that was destined for him. In Wang Chong's memory, he would probably become the imperial uncle in less than a year, leaping from Yang Zhao to that Yang Guizhong. At the same time, the consort Taizhen behind him would rise higher and higher. In the end, he would go from an imperial consort to a real imperial consort. The wheel of history was already turning, and Wang Chong could not stop it. He could only get used to it and approach it. Since the wheel would always turn and could not stop, then he would try his best to make the wheel move in a direction that was beneficial to him. Shanghai, go! Bring me 5,000 taels of gold and give it to Lord Yang. As these thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind, he suddenly waved his hand towards the door. Yes, this subordinate will do it right away. The rumbling footsteps left, and Shanghai quickly disappeared outside to fetch the gold. How can I accept this? Yang Zhao was startled at first, but then a smile blossomed on his face. What's there to be embarrassed about? It's just 5,000 taels of gold. It's just a token of my appreciation. Lord Yang, there's no need to take it to heart. Wang Chong waved his hands casually. What Lord Yang? Just call me Brother Yang. Wang Gongzi, since we hit it off, why don't we become sworn brothers? Yang Zhao looked at Wang Chong and suddenly said, Become sworn brothers? Sworn brothers? Wang Chong was stunned. His first reaction was to wonder if Yang Zhao was joking with him. Between him and Yang Zhao, one was already in his 40s while the other was only 15. How could they become sworn brothers under such circumstances? He had heard of friends across generations, but he had never heard of sworn brothers across generations. However, when he raised his head and looked at Yang Zhao carefully, Wang Chong realized that the other party was completely serious. There wasn't the slightest bit of falsehood in his words. Wang Chong was taken aback. When he finally recovered, Wang Chong was delighted. Great. This guy was much more powerful than him. He only wanted to spend some money to win people's hearts. But this guy directly asked him to become sworn brothers. Even though there was such a big age difference, it was not a problem at all. At this moment, Wang Chong was truly impressed by this future imperial brother-in-law. Compared with him, he was still a child's play, be it in terms of means or shamelessness. It was no wonder that this person would be able to do whatever he wanted in the court in the future and occupy a very important position in the history of the Tang dynasty. What's wrong, Wang Gongzi? Are you unwilling? Yang Zhao's voice came into his ears. He was just trying to ask on a whim. If Wang Chong flinched, he naturally wouldn't force him. Why would I? Wang Chong also came to his senses and chuckled. It's rare for you to take care of me. Wang Chong is willing to come in time. Since that's the case, why don't we choose today to become sworn brothers? So we have the same idea. Great. Let's become sworn brothers today. Yang Zhao immediately said excitedly. Wang Chong was the descendant of Duke Jiao. He came from a famous family and was valued by the king of Song. Now, because of the memorial he submitted, he had won the favor of the civil and military officials of the court and the generals at the border. He was a real man of influence and a rising star in the political world. His future was bound to be limitless. In terms of status, this person was now far superior to him. Yang Zhao only asked tentatively about the matter of becoming sworn brothers. He didn't expect that Wang Chong would actually agree. For Yang Zhao, this was definitely an unexpected gain. The Wang family had ready-made money, paper, incense, and candles. Taking this opportunity, Yang Zhao hurriedly pulled Wang Chong to bow 3 times in front of the gods of heaven and earth. Then he cut his index finger, drank the blood, and swore to become sworn brothers. Big brother, little brother. The 2 of them stood up from the ground, looked at each other, and burst into laughter. Wang Chong, from now on, you are my Yang Zhao's brother. Anyone who dares to harm you is equivalent to harming me, Yang Zhao. Her Highness is my younger sister, and in the future, she will be your older sister as well. In the future, you should come to the royal palace more often to play. We brothers need to get closer and interact more. Yang Zhao patted Wang Chong's shoulder vigorously. Big brother, there's no need to stand on ceremony. If you need anything in the future, feel free to speak. Wang Chong also laughed. Big brother, I am really poor right now, so I won't stand on ceremony with you. However, as your elder brother, I didn't come empty-handed this time. I also have a gift for you. But remember to open it after I leave. All of a sudden, Yang Zhao passed a box over. Blinking his eyes, he gave Zhang Xian a mysterious look. Wang Chong was taken aback, and his curiosity was piqued. Don't forget that you can only open it after I leave. Yang Zhao smiled as he pressed down on the box. It won't be long. Her Highness is still waiting in the royal palace. You just got out of prison today, and there are many people you need to meet. I won't disturb you any further, I'll be leaving first. Big brother, I'll send you off. Wang Chong didn't stop him. He personally walked Yang Zhao to the door. Accompanying Yang Zhao on the carriage was a huge gift. Of course, this gift wasn't just 5,000 gold taels, but 50,000. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.